Welcome back to our late-night listeners. This Scary Stories channel explores ghosts and haunted places where echoes of the past refuse to fade. If you enjoy the stories, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Get cozy. Story 1. The Old Hotel, where every guest checks in but never checks out. The sign hung crooked over the two-lane highway, its neon flickering in the rain like a dying pulse. The Granville vacancy, not vacancies, singular vacancy, as if only one room waited, patient, expectant, for the right traveler to stumble in out of the storm. My car coughed its last breath a mile back. Steam hissed from the hood like a warning exhalation. I've been driving for 14 hours straight, chasing a job interview in Pittsburgh that had evaporated by voicemail 3 towns ago. My phone was dead. My wallet held $20 and a half-eaten protein bar, and the rain, cold, relentless April rain, was turning the shoulder into a slick of mud and gravel. I walked. The Granville loomed out of the downpour like a forgotten monument. 5 stories of red brick darkened by decades of soot and neglect. Its once grand facade sagging at the cornices, windows boarded or broken, the porte cochere collapsed in on itself like a fallen ribcage. A wrought iron gate, rust-eaten and twisted, hung open just enough to admit a single person. The lobby doors were unlocked. Inside, the air was thick, not dusty, not stale, but preserved, like stepping into a sealed jar. The scent was old carpet beeswax, and underneath it all, the faint, sweet mold reek of damp plaster and something else. Something floral, cloying, like lilacs left too long in stagnant water. A chandelier hung overhead, crusted with cobwebs, 3 of its bulbs still lit, dim, yellow, casting long, trembling shadows across the check-in desk. Behind it sat a man. He hadn't moved when I entered, hadn't looked up. He was ancient, 80s, maybe older, with skin like crumpled rice paper stretched over sharp bone. His hair was silver white, thin as cobweb, combed over a liver-spotted scalp. He wore a faded maroon vest, brass buttons tarnished green, over a white shirt with a frayed collar. His hands rested on the ledger. Before him, long fingers, knuckles swollen with arthritis, nails yellowed and ridged. "Room," I said, my voice rough from disuse and cold. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, like ice over deep water. They didn't blink, not once. "Room 317, he said. His voice was dry, whisper-thin, as if spoken through layers of gauze. "Cash only. $40. One night." I handed him 2 20s. He didn't count them, just slid them into a drawer without looking. He tore a key from a brass ring, old, heavy, stamped 3017, and pushed it across the desk. The key was cold, unnaturally so, like it had been resting on ice. "No checkout time," he said, still not blinking. "The room retains its guest until departure is appropriate." I frowned. What does that mean? A flicker in those pale eyes. Not amusement, not warning. Recognition. "Elevator's out," he said, ignoring my question. "Stairs are to your left. 3rd. Floor. End of the hall." I turned. "Mr. Hale," he added. I stopped. "Yeah?" "My name is Mr. Hale. Should you need assistance?" I nodded, already backing away. The staircase was narrow, carpeted in a once rich burgundy now faded to the color of dried blood. Each step groaned, not the usual creak of old wood, but a low, wet squelch, like stepping on something buried just beneath the surface. The hallway on the 3rd floor stretched into dimness, Wall sconces flickered erratically, casting stuttering light over peeling floral wallpaper. The pattern was roses, but the longer I looked, the more the petals seemed to twist, to curl inward like clenched fists. Some blooms looked disturbingly like eyes. Room 317 was at the very end. The door was solid oak, dark with age. No peephole, no number plate, just a brass keyhole, tarnished black around the edges. I inserted the key. It turned with a sound like a bone snapping. The door opened inward. The room was small, Spartan. A narrow bed with an iron frame, a nightstand with a ceramic lamp, shade-stained yellow, a straight-backed chair, and a small dresser with a mirror clouded at the edges. The window looked out over the hotel's rear courtyard, a tangle of dead hedges and a dry stone fountain choked with weeds. It was clean, too clean, no dust, no fingerprints on the lamp. The sheets were crisp, hospital white, tucked with military precision. I dropped my duffel on the chair. Exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress didn't give. It was hard, unyielding, like lying on a slab. I lay back, stared at the ceiling. Water stains bloomed there, dark branching patterns like veins or roots or neural pathways. One large stain spread from the center outward, forming a rough asymmetrical circle. At its heart, the plaster was slightly raised, not bulging, just taut, like skin stretched over something pressing up from above. I closed my eyes. Sleep came fast and deep. I woke to the sound of breathing, not mine, slow, wet, rhythmic, right beside the bed. I froze, didn't move a muscle. The breathing continued. Inhale, a long rasping draw like air pulled through wet gravel. Exhale, a low bubbling sigh. I opened my eyes. The room was dark. The streetlight outside cast a weak orange rectangle on the far wall. Next to the bed, where the nightstand stood, a shape waited, taller than a man, thin. Its head brushed the ceiling. It had no features, no face, just a smooth, pale oval where a face should be. But as I watched, the surface rippled. A mouth formed, thin, lipless, opening slowly. No teeth, just darkness inside. It leaned down. Closer, the smell hit me. Lilacs, rotting lilacs, and beneath it, the coppery tang of old blood. Its breath washed over my face, cold, damp, smelling of earth and stagnant water. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, paralyzed, not by fear, though terror screamed in my skull, but by something deeper, a command, a pressure behind my eyes. Do not resist, do not witness, this is not for you. The mouth opened wider, a sound emerged, not a voice, but a chorus of whispers, layered, overlapping, all speaking at once, all saying the same thing. Stay. Then it was gone. I sat bolt upright, gasping. Sweat soaked my shirt. The room was empty. Sunlight, weak gray, filtered through the grimy window. Morning. I stumbled to the bathroom down the hall. The mirror above the sink was fogged. Not with steam. I hadn't run the water, but with a fine, oily condensation. I wiped it with my sleeve. My reflection stared back, pale, exhausted, and behind my left shoulder, just at the edge of the frame, another face, not mine, a woman, mid-30s, dark hair plastered to her temples, eyes wide, pupils blown black with terror. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. I whirled. The bathroom was empty. I looked back at the mirror. Just me. But on the fogged glass where her face had been, words were forming, slowly, as if written by an invisible fingertip. He knows you saw me. I ran back to 317, packed my duffel in 30 seconds. I needed to leave, now. I yanked open the door. The hallway stretched before me, But it was longer, much longer. The far end, the stairs, were gone, replaced by more hallway, identical, repeating into dimness. Doors lined both sides, all closed, all numbered, but the numbers made no sense. 209, 412, 103, 307, 307, 307. 3 doors down, one stood slightly ajar. Room 318. From within, a low, rhythmic thumping, like a fist, pounding weakly against wood. Thump, thump, thump. I backed into my room, slammed the door, locked it, leaned against it, heart hammering. It's the stress, I told myself. Sleep deprivation, carbon monoxide, old furnace. I needed proof. I pulled out my phone. Dead. Still. But the hotel's landline, ancient rotary on the nightstand, sat silent. I picked up the receiver, a dial tone, faint, warbling. I dialed 911. It rang, once, twice. Then a voice answered. Not a dispatcher, a man, young, terrified. Hello? Hello, is someone there? Please, please. Tell them I'm in 209. Tell them I never checked out. He won't let me. I tried the window, but the glass, it moved. It held me. The line went dead. I dropped the receiver. It dangled, swaying, bumping against the nightstand. Click. The lamp turned on by itself. The bulb glowed, not yellow, but a sickly, pulsing green. In the mirror atop the dresser, my reflection wasn't alone. The woman stood behind me now, closer. Her hand rested on my shoulder. Her fingers were ice. I spun. Nothing but the mirror. The reflection lingered for a second longer, her face contorted in silent agony before fading. On the mirror's surface, new words appeared, dripping, like condensation. Don't trust the stairs. I had to get out. I threw open the door again. The hallway was back to normal length. The stairs waited at the end. I ran down one flight. The wallpaper here was different, striped, not floral. But the stripes weren't vertical. They curved, subtly, like the inside of a throat. Second floor, a door stood open, room 209. I slowed, peered in, empty, bed stripped, dresser bare. But the carpet, dark stains radiated from the center of the room in perfect concentric circles, like something had bled outward. A lot. And on the wall above the bed, scrawled in what looked like charcoal or dried blood, 3 words. I still wait. I fled down to the first floor. The lobby was empty. Mr. Hale was gone. The ledger lay open on the desk. I approached. The page was filled, not with names, but with dates. April 3rd, 1952, October 17th, 1968, March 9th, 1977, November 2nd, 1984, July 14th, 1991, August 31st, 2003, September 5, 2010 hours, April 12th, 2020, today's date. At the bottom of the page, in fresh, wet ink, Jacob Miller, room 3 left in Tenant. My name. I hadn't given it to him. I backed away, toward the front doors. They were locked, not just locked, sealed. The wood around the frame was swollen, dark, glistening, faintly, like wet meat. I pounded on the glass. Hey, anyone, let me out! My reflection stared back, and behind me, in the lobby's shadows, figures stood. A man in a business suit, tie askew, one eye swollen shut. A teenage boy clutching a basketball, his neck bent at an impossible angle. The woman from the mirror, her mouth still open in that silent scream. They didn't move, just watched. Waiting. I turned. Mr. Hale stood at the foot of the stairs. He held a brass key ring. Every key on it was identical. Everyone stamped 301 Paranormal Hall. Departure is not yet appropriate, he whispered. I ran for the service door, marked employees only, near the front desk. It opened easily. A narrow corridor, dark, smelling of mildew and bleach. At the end, a door with a crash bar. I slammed my shoulder into it. It gave. Cold air hit my face. I stumbled out into the hotel's courtyard. The dead hedges, the dry fountain, but the gate to the street, gone, replaced by more hedges, taller, thicker, twisted into an impenetrable wall. The fountain wasn't dry. Water, thick, dark, smelling of iron, bubbled sluggishly in its basin, and floating in it, a key. Brass. Stamped, 3 I didn't want it, but my hand reached out, pulled it from the water. It was warm, pulsing, like a heart. I looked up. Every window on the hotel's rear facade was open. Everyone held a face, watching me, waiting. The woman in 3117's window mouthed 2 words. Come home. I turned back to the service door. It was gone. Only brick wall now, smooth, seamless, no handle, no seam. Just the words, etched into the mortar in that same looping script. You are already in. Panic, raw and primal, tore through me. I ran to the nearest ground floor window, room 101. Peered in. Empty, bed made, but the closet door stood open. Inside, shoes, dozens of them, men's, women's, children's, all sizes, all caked in dried mud, and beside them, suitcases, packed, zipped, labels visible, E, Voss, D, Alden, M, Henderson, J, Miller, my name. I stumbled back. The courtyard was shrinking, the hedges pressed inward, branches clicking like insect legs. The fountain's water rose, bubbling higher, darker, filling with shapes. Hands. Pale, bloated hands, reaching up, grasping. I ran for the back of the property, where the old garage should be. Found it. The door hung open. Inside, not cars, beds, dozens of narrow cots arranged in rows, all occupied. People lay on them, men, women, young, old, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, not breathing, not moving, but their chests rose and fell, slowly, rhythmically. Thump, thump, thump. Not hearts. The floor beneath each cot pulsed, like something massive breathed below the foundation. I backed out. Rain had stopped. The sky was bruised purple. Night falling fast. I had one idea left. The roof. Fire escape. I found the rusted iron stairs bolted to the side of the building, climbed, 3rd floor. My window, 317, glowed with that sickly green light. I didn't look. 4th floor, windows dark. 5th floor. The access door to the roof hung ajar. I pushed it open. The roof was flat, gravel strewn. Wind whipped my hair. The town lights glittered in the distance. Freedom, maybe 2 miles away. I could run. Jump to the next building? The drop was 20 feet. Risky, but better than a sound behind me. I turned. Mr. Hale stood at the roof access. He wasn't alone. The woman, Eleanor, stood beside him. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were open, but white, clouded. She held a suitcase. It was mine. Departure requires completion, Mr. Hale said, his voice carrying unnaturally in the wind. Completion of what? I screamed. Eleanor stepped forward. She opened the suitcase. Not my clothes inside, just paper, hundreds of sheets, all filled with the same phrase, written in frantic overlapping hands. I want to leave. And beneath them, blank pages, waiting. She held out a pen. It was bone, sharp at one end. Sign, she whispered, her voice a chorus of dry leaves scraping stone. Sign, and you may go. My hand moved, not by choice, drawn by the pen, by the blank page, by the need, sudden, overwhelming, to put my name to something, to confirm my presence, to be acknowledged. I took the pen, touched it to the paper. The moment the point met the page, the roof shuddered. A deep, groaning vibration rose through the gravel. The hotel inhaled. Windows flared green. Every door on every floor slammed open at once, And from within, the sound, not scratching, not whispering, singing. A low, wordless drone, hundreds of voices harmonizing in a key that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The pen bit into my finger, blood welled, dripped onto the page. The blood didn't soak in, it moved, crawled across the paper, formed letters, not my name. Welcome home. The pen twisted in my grip, wrenched my hand down, forced my fingers toward my own eye. I fought, muscles screaming, but the hotel song filled my skull, drowning thought, drowning will. Stay, stay, stay. The pen's point touched my eyelid, cold, sharp. I heard the membrane tear, felt the wet slide inward, not pain. Relief, a release of pressure, a door opening. Inside my head, light, not white, green, pulsing, and behind the light, them, the guests, not trapped, integrated. Their faces swam in the green glow. Eleanor, the businessman, the boy, dozens more, smiling now, peaceful, waiting for me to join the chorus. The pen withdrew. My vision in that eye was gone, replaced by the green light. But with the other, I saw the roof. Mr. Hale and Eleanor were gone. The access door stood open. Wind howled. I walked to the edge, looked down. The courtyard was full now. Hundreds of figures stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the hotel, all looking up, all staring at me, all smiling. The green light in my ruined eye pulsed brighter, stronger, sinking with the thumping in the floor, sinking with the song. My mouth opened without my consent, and I began to sing, the same note, the same wordless drone. Down below, the crowd smile widened. They knew it was done. I wasn't leaving. I was checking in, permanently. The wind died. The town lights flickered out. Only the hotel remained, glowing green from every window, every crack, every seam. A beacon, a lighthouse for the lost, for the desperate, for the ones who just need a place to rest. I turned from the edge, walked back to the access door, descended the stairs. The hallway on the third floor was clean, bright, fresh paint, floral wallpaper, roses, whole and perfect. Room 3117's door stood open. The bed was made. The suitcase sat on the chair, zipped, waiting. The key rested on the nightstand. I picked it up. Cold, familiar. I slipped it into my pocket, walked to the window, looked out. The courtyard was empty. The gate stood open. A car idled at the curb, a beat-up sedan, steam rising from its hood. A young man stepped out, shoulders slumped, face pale with exhaustion. He looked up, right at my window. Our eyes met. I raised my hand, not in warning, in welcome. I smiled, and mouthed the words Mr. Hale had taught me. Vacancy. He hesitated, then walked toward the gate, toward the door, toward me. I turned from the window. The green light in my eye pulsed warmly. The song hummed in my chest. The room waited, patient, expectant, ready for its next guest. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress gave slightly, just enough. I closed my good eye, listened to the breathing start beside me, slow, wet, rhythmic. Stay, it whispered, and this time I whispered back, yes. And with that, this story comes to an end. Let's move on to the next one. I rented a room that comes with a previous tenant still living in it. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the listing. It popped up on a sketchy rental site I only used in emergencies. After my third roommate in 6 months bailed without notice, taking half my deposit in my favorite coffee mug with her, the ad was sparse, almost defiant in its minimalism. Private room and quiet house, fully furnished, utilities included, 275-month, no credit check, immediate move-in, must be quiet after 10 p.m. No photos, no address, just a cross street in the old mill district of Blackwater Falls, a town I'd only heard of in passing. The contact number led to a voicemail with a voice so soft it was almost a whisper. Leave your name and say why you're alone. Creepy? Absolutely. Desperate? Also yes. I left my name, Daniel Reeves, and added, my girlfriend left. My dog died. I just need a place to disappear for a while. Less than an hour later, a text came through. Room's yours. Come tonight. Key under the blue pot. No lease, no ID, no questions. I drove into Blackwater Falls as the sun dipped below the pines, casting long skeletal shadows across the road. The town felt suspended in time. Gas lamps flickered on Main Street. Storefronts bore hand-painted signs, and the only sound was the distant rush of the river cutting through the gorge. The house was on Sycamore Lane, a narrow street lined with elms so tall they blotted out the moon. It was a 2-story brick craftsman, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, with a sagging porch and a single lit window on the second floor. The blue pot sat beside the door, cracked and filled with dead ivy. Under it, an old iron key cold to the touch. The door opened with a groan. Inside, the air was thick, not dusty, but stale, like breath held too long. The entryway smelled of lavender and something faintly metallic like old pennies. A hallway stretched ahead, lined with closed doors. At the end, a staircase spiraled upward, its banister carved with strange whorls that looked almost like eyes if you stared too long. A note was taped to the fridge. Room is upstairs, last door on the left. Rent in cash on the first. Do not enter other rooms. Do not use the basement. Be quiet after 10. He doesn't like noise. M. Holloway. I frowned. He? The listing never mentioned another tenant, but the room, when I found it, was perfect, spacious, with hardwood floors, a bay window overlooking the backyard, and a cast-iron bed with crisp white sheets. A small desk, a wardrobe, a reading lamp, even a record player in the corner, though no records were visible. The bathroom down the hall was clean, with hot water and thick towels. It felt staged, like a museum exhibit titled Life of a Normal Person. I dropped my duffel bag on the bed and exhaled. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace. Then I heard it. A soft thump from the room next door, like someone shifting in bed. I froze. The house was supposed to be empty, except for me. I checked the door I just passed, second on the left. It was slightly ajar. Darkness yawned beyond. I knocked. Hello? Anyone there? Silence. I pushed the door open. The room was identical to mine. Same bed, same desk, same window, but everything was worn. The sheets were gray with use, the rug frayed, the mirror above the dresser fogged with age. And on the desk, a half-empty glass of water, a paperback novel splayed open, and a steaming mug of tea. The tea was still hot. My pulse jumped. I backed out and shut the door. That night, I ate a protein bar and lay in bed, listening. At 10:03 p.m., the floorboards creaked. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath, a soft sigh, long and tired, pressed against the wood. Then silence. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. Sorry I startled you. I didn't know someone new was moving in. I've been here a while. Please don't tell the landlady I can't leave yet. No signature. The handwriting was neat, looping, almost feminine. But the voice in my head from last night, had been mail. I showed the note to Mrs. Holloway when she dropped by to check the furnace. She was in her 70s, with sharp eyes and a bun so tight it pulled the wrinkles from her face. "Previous tenant?" she said, stirring her tea with a silver spoon. "No, dear. You're the only one." "But I saw his room, his things. His tea was hot." She didn't look up. "The house plays tricks. Grief does that. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" I hadn't told her about my girlfriend or my dog. I didn't mention the note again. But that night, at 10:02, the footsteps returned. This time, I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the door to the neighboring room was open. Inside, the tea was gone. In its place, a fresh slice of bread on a china plate, crusts cut off, just like my mom used to make. My throat tightened. "Who are you?" I called into the room. A whisper came from the closet. "Someone who stayed too long." I slammed the door and locked it from the outside. The next day, I tried to ignore it. I wrote in my journal, took walks by the river, pretended the house was normal. But at 5 p.m., I came back to find my bed neatly made, though I'd left it rumpled. My clothes were folded in the drawer, though I'd tossed them on the chair. And on my pillow, a single white feather. That evening, I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. At 10 p.m., the doorknob turned. Slowly. I didn't move. The door opened 6 inches. A hand appeared, pale, bony with chipped nails, and placed a small wrapped parcel on the floor. Then it retreated. I waited 10 minutes before picking it up. Inside, a Polaroid. It showed me, asleep in this very bed, moonlight on my face. The timestamp in the corner read, October 12th, 1998. I hadn't been born until 1995. But the photo? It felt real. The sheets were the same. The angle was identical. I checked the neighboring room again. This time, I went inside and searched. The wardrobe contained men's clothes, sweaters, slacks, a pair of worn loafers. All smelled faintly of cedar and mildew. In the nightstand drawer, a wallet. Inside, a driver's license. Name, Julian Voss. Dobb, March 3rd, 1971. Address, 47 Sycamore Lane, Blackwater Falls. The photo showed a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a sad smile. The expiration date, October 1998. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Julian had been dead for over 20 years, and yet his tea was hot, his bread was fresh, his footsteps echoed nightly. I ran downstairs and banged on Mrs. Holloway's door. She opened it in a housecoat, unsurprised. "I told you," she said softly, "you're the only tenant." "But Julian Voss lived here. He never left," she interrupted. "Not really." She invited me in and poured 2 cups of tea. The steam curled like ghosts. "Julian rented that room in 1996, she said. "He was a writer, quiet, kind. He came to Blackwater Falls to finish his novel, said the quiet would help." She paused, stirring her tea slowly. "One night, he didn't come down for dinner. I knocked. No answer. I used my key. He was sitting at his desk, pen in hand, eyes open. Heart just stopped. No warning. I called the coroner. They took him away. I cleaned the room, put it back on the market. But no one stayed long. They'd hear him, moving, breathing, sighing. Some said he'd tuck them in at night. Others said he'd leave notes asking for company. She looked at me. He doesn't mean harm. He's just lonely. And the house. It holds on to people who aren't ready to go. "Then why rent the room?" I demanded. "Because," she said quietly, "if no one lives there, he grows stronger. The house needs a witness, someone to see him. to keep him anchored. Otherwise, she didn't finish. I moved out the next morning, or tried to. My car wouldn't start. My phone lost signal. When I walked to the bus station, I got turned around in the woods behind the house and found myself back on Sycamore Lane an hour later, shoes muddy, hands shaking. That night, Julian left another gift, a journal, on the first page in his handwriting. If you're reading this, you're like me. You don't belong anywhere else. I read it all. Julian had come to Blackwater Falls after his wife left him. His publisher dropped him. His dog died. Sound familiar? He wrote that the house spoke to him. Softly at first, then louder, it promised peace, quiet, an end to loneliness. But the price was staying, forever. He tried to leave once, made it to the county line, woke up back in his bed, sheets cold, heart racing. The house wouldn't let him go. Now it had me. I stopped fighting. I started leaving my door open at night. At 10:07, Julian would appear, just a silhouette at first, then more solid as the weeks passed. He never spoke, just watched me sleep, sometimes adjusting my blanket if I kicked it off. One night, I woke to find him sitting in the chair by the window, staring at the moon. "Why me?" I whispered. His voice was like dry leaves. "Because you wanted to disappear. The house only takes those who are already halfway gone." I didn't leave after that. Why would I? Out there, the world is loud, cruel, indifferent. Here, I have company. Here, I'm seen. Last week, I left a note for the next tenant. Don't be afraid of the man in the next room. He's just like you. And if you listen closely at night, you'll hear him breathing and know you're not alone. Mrs. Holloway brought up a new mattress yesterday. Said someone answered the listing. A young woman, sad eyes, carrying one suitcase. She moved into my room. I'm in Julian's now, and tonight at 10 p.m., I'll slip a slice of bread onto her pillow because the house always needs a new witness, and the previous tenant never really leaves. And with that, this story comes to an end. Let's move on to the next one. The town's cemetery has no graves, but I keep hearing screams underground. My therapist, a woman with a kind face and a voice as soft as felt, called it a geographical cure. The idea that a change of scenery could somehow cauterize the gaping wound in my life. I didn't have the heart to tell her that my grief wasn't a geographical problem. It was a parasitic entity that had taken up residence behind my eyes, and it would pack a bag and come with me wherever I went. Still, the thought of leaving the city, with its million tiny ghosts of a life I'd once shared with my wife Anna, was a compelling one. So I packed my laptop, a few boxes of books, and the metaphorical suitcase full of sorrow, and drove north. The town I chose was called Havenwood. I'd found it on a list of America's most quaint and quiet towns, a bit of online clickbait that suddenly felt like a lifeline. The picture showed a postcard-perfect hamlet nestled in a valley of rolling green hills, a place that looked like it had been put under a glass dome sometime in the 1950s and forgotten about. It was exactly the kind of anesthetic silence I was looking for, and for the first week, it was. I rented a small, furnished cottage at the edge of town, a place that smelled of lemon polish and old wood. The locals were friendly in a cautious, practiced way. They smiled from behind the counters of the general store and the single-pump gas station, their eyes holding a placid, almost unnerving calm. It was a town that seemed to be holding its breath, perpetually waiting for a storm that never came. It was on a walk, during that hazy liminal hour between dusk and true night, that I found a cemetery. It lay on a gentle slope just west of the town, surrounded by a magnificent wrought iron fence that was a masterpiece of Gothic curlicues and spear points. The gate was a grand arched affair with the words Havenwood Memorial Green forged into the iron. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning a low, mournful protest, and stepped inside. The air within the gates was different, cooler, heavier. The grass was a perfect emerald carpet, impossibly lush and manicured, rolling over the soft contours of the hill. Ancient, weeping willows stood like silent, grieving giants, their branches stirring in a breeze I couldn't feel. It was beautiful, and it was profoundly wrong. There were no graves, not a single headstone, no marble angels, no granite crosses, no humble, weathered markers. There were no raised mounds of earth, no flower arrangements, no tiny flags. It was a park, a beautiful, empty, and utterly soulless park that called itself a cemetery. I walked the entire perimeter, my footsteps unnaturally loud on a pristine lawn, a growing sense of dislocation crawling up my spine. A cemetery is a place of names, of dates, of remembrance etched in stone. This place was a blank page, a void. I was standing near the center of the green, watching the last vestiges of sunset bleed across the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange when I heard it for the first time. It was faint, so faint I almost missed it. A high, thin sound, like a distant siren or the cry of a hawk. I tilted my head, straining to hear it over the blood rushing in my own ears. The sound came again, and this time there was no mistaking it. It was a voice, a human voice, stretched and distorted by distance and desperation. It was a scream, and it was coming from the ground beneath my feet. I froze, my body going rigid. The sound was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a silence that was now charged with a terrible, new significance. It had to be the wind, an animal. My mind, raw and frayed from months of grief, was playing tricks on me. I told myself this, repeated it like a mantra as I backed away from the center of the lawn, my eyes wide, scanning the empty, perfect grass. I didn't stop walking until the iron gate clanged shut behind me, the sound echoing in the twilight like a cell door locking. The next morning, I tried to rationalize it. My cottage was old, the pipes probably groaned. The woods were full of foxes and bobcats whose cries could sound unnervingly human. But the memory of the sound, its specific human tenor of agony, was a fishhook in my mind. I went into town for coffee, needing the comforting banality of human interaction. The diner was a small, bright place called the Morning Glory, and the woman behind the counter, a middle-aged lady named Brenda with a beehive of impossibly blonde hair, slid a mug in front of me with a practiced, friendly smile. "You're the writer, aren't you?" she asked, her voice cheerful. "Renting the old Miller place." News traveled fast in Havenwood. "That's me," I said, forcing a smile in return. "Leo Vance." "Brenda, welcome to Havenwood. Hope you're finding the peace and quiet you were looking for." Her smile was so open, so genuine, that I felt a surge of courage. "I am. It's a beautiful town. I was walking by the cemetery last night, the Memorial Green." Brenda's smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes tightened, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. The light behind them dimmed for a fraction of a second. "Oh, yes, our green," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Isn't it lovely?" So much nicer than a field full of sad old stones, don't you think? It's certainly unique, I said, choosing my words carefully. I've never seen a cemetery without any graves before. What do you do? Cremation? She wiped down a perfectly clean section of the counter. We don't believe in dwelling on the end, Mr. Vance. We believe in celebrating life. When someone passes, their spirit is freed, returned to the valley. The green is a place for quiet reflection on that freedom. It's a place for life, not death. The answer was so polished, so rehearsed. It was like she was reading from a town brochure. It was a neat, tidy deflection that answered nothing at all. I wanted to press, to ask her if she'd ever heard strange noises there, but the look in her eyes, a sudden hard glint of warning behind the friendly facade, stopped me. Don't ask, the look said. You don't want to know. I couldn't stay away. The memorial green drew me back that evening, a moth to a flame I knew would burn me. This time, I was prepared. I brought a high-powered directional microphone, a relic from my brief, ill-fated foray into podcasting. I sat on a stone bench just inside the gates, the headphones pressed tight against my ears, and pointed the microphone at the center of the lawn. For an hour, there was nothing but the soft, rustling sound of the willow leaves and the low, ambient hum of a world settling down for the night. I was starting to feel foolish, a paranoid man chasing auditory ghosts. Then, through the headphones, the sound erupted. It wasn't a single scream this time. It was a chorus, a cacophony of voices, muffled and overlapping, rising from the earth. They were faint, but the microphone amplified them, bringing their horror into sharp, terrifying focus. I could distinguish individual voices now, a woman weeping hysterically, a man shouting a single, guttural word over and over again, and a child crying for its mother. They weren't ghosts. They weren't echoes. They were the sounds of living people in unbearable agony. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the microphone. I ripped the headphones off, my heart jackhammering against my ribs. The sounds vanished, replaced by the placid evening quiet. The disconnect was dizzying, schizophrenic. The serene, beautiful park, and the charnel house of sound that existed just beneath its surface. My journalistic instincts, dormant for so long, roared back to life, fueled by a potent cocktail of terror and outrage. This was not a haunting. This was a crime, a monstrous, ongoing crime, hidden beneath a blanket of perfect green grass. The Havenwood Town Library was a small brick building that smelled of dust and decaying paper. The librarian was a man named Mr. Abernathy, a creature who seemed to have been grown in the dark, dusty stacks he inhabited. He was impossibly old and thin, with skin like parchment stretched over a bird skull, and he watched me with watery, faded blue eyes as I browsed the meager local history section. The official town histories were useless, filled with the same kind of bland, cheerful prose as Brenda's explanation. They spoke of founding fathers, harvest festivals, and a strong, resilient community. But in the back, in a section of brittle, leather-bound ledgers containing the town's vital records, I found the first crack in the story. The ledgers recorded every birth, every marriage, every death in Havenwood since its founding in the late 1700s. I started with the most recent and worked my way back. The death records were meticulously kept. Cause of death, next of kin, place of burial, And up until 1923, every single entry for place of burial read Havenwood Cemetery. Then, in the autumn of 1973, they just stopped. The deaths were still recorded. A flu here, a heart attack there, but the place of burial column was left starkly, uniformly blank. From that point on, for nearly 100 years, not a single burial was recorded in the town of Havenwood. I cross-referenced the date with the old bound copies of the Havenwood Valley Chronicle. The issues from the summer of 1923 were full of the usual small-town news. Then, in late September, the tone shifted. There was a small cryptic article on the front page about a virulent, fast-moving sickness that had taken hold in the town. The article was vague, with no mention of symptoms or official diagnoses. The following week's edition was thinner, half its usual size. It mentioned the deaths of several prominent citizens, including the town doctor. And then the newspaper stopped. The next available issue was from the spring of 1924, and it was like reading a paper from a different town. The tone was relentlessly optimistic. There were articles about a new town charter, about the founding of the memorial green on the site of the old cemetery, a place to look forward, not back. There was no mention of the sickness, no list of the dead. The intervening months had been surgically excised from the town's history. The name that kept appearing in the pre-1923 records was Blackwood. The Blackwood family had founded Havenwood. They had owned the iron mine that had been the town's lifeblood for a century. I found a photograph of the family from around 1920. At its center was the patriarch, Hezekiah Blackwood, a man with a severe black beard and eyes that seemed to burn with a cold, fanatical fire. He looked like an Old Testament prophet, a man who would not suffer fools or sinners. The Blackwood iron mine, according to the records, had closed for good in October of 1923. The same month, the burials had stopped. As my investigation deepened, the town's subtle hostility began to coalesce around me. The friendly smiles became fixed and glassy. Conversations would stop when I entered a general store. I'd feel their eyes on my back as I walked down the street. The quiet of the town was no longer peaceful. It was watchful. The phenomena in my cottage began. It started with small things. A book I'd left on the table would be on the floor. The faucet in the bathroom would be dripping, even though I knew I'd turned it off tightly. Then came the whispers, faint, sibilant sounds from the corners of the rooms, just on the edge of my hearing. They sounded like the rustling of dry leaves, but they had a cadence, a rhythm, like a hushed, urgent conversation I couldn't quite make out. One night, I woke up from a nightmare I couldn't remember, my body drenched in a cold sweat. The room was freezing. I could see my breath in the moonlight slanting through the window, and in the corner of the room there was a patch of darkness that was blacker than the surrounding shadows. It seemed to pulse, to breathe. As I watched, paralyzed with a primal pre-verbal terror, a single, pale, skeletal hand emerged from the darkness, reaching towards me, its fingers twitching. I cried out and threw myself back against a headboard, and the darkness and the hand vanished. I was being warned. The message was clear. Stop digging. But I couldn't. The thought of those voices of that child crying for its mother made it impossible to stop. I found an old hand-drawn geological survey map of the valley in the library archives, a map that Mr. Abernathy had seemed reluctant to show me. It confirmed my growing, horrifying suspicion. The Blackwood iron mine was a sprawling network of tunnels, and they ran directly and extensively beneath the perfect green lawn of the Memorial Green. It was a man the locals called Old Man Hemlock who gave me the final jagged piece of the puzzle. He was a recluse who lived in a shack deep in the woods, a man the town treated as a harmless eccentric. I found him sitting on his porch, carving a piece of wood with a gnarled, steady hand. His eyes, when he looked up at me, were surprisingly clear and sane. "You're the fella asking questions," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I said, my heart pounding. "Some holes are best left unfilled," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "You hear 'em, don't you? The hungry ones?" "What are they?" I whispered. "What happened here?" He looked out toward the distant green slope of the cemetery. "That ain't a sickness that took this town in 23, he said, his voice dropping even lower. "That was a reckoning. Hezekiah Blackwood, he didn't dig for iron in that hill. He was digging for something else, something older than the hills themselves. He made a pact for prosperity, for longevity, a fountain of youth watered by tears." My blood ran cold. "What kind of pact?" "The kind that demands a price," Hemlock said. "A tithe. The earth gives, but the earth must be fed. The sickness was a lie to cover the first payment. They didn't die, not really. Hezekiah, he and his chosen, they took the sick, the weak, the old, and they put them in the tunnels, alive, an offering to keep the darkness in the ground happy." I stared at him, my mind reeling, trying to process the sheer Lovecraftian horror of his words. This wasn't a mass grave. It was a larder, a subterranean prison farm of human suffering, the impossible, vibrant health of the town, its placid calm, its unnatural resistance to the decay of the outside world. It was all being paid for by the screams of the damned. "The townspeople," I started. "They're the descendants," he finished, for me. "The jailers. They live their long, happy lives on top of a symphony of agony. Every one of them. And they know the rules. The pact must be honored. The tithe must be paid." He looked me straight in the eye, his gaze sharp and piercing. "And you hear that bell in the town square? That ain't a church bell. It's rung when one of them is near the end. It's a dinner bell. Lets the hungry ones know a new resident is on the way. Keeps the cycle going." A wave of nausea washed over me. I thought of Brenda's hard, warning eyes, the watchful silence of the town. This wasn't just a secret. It was a religion. A monstrous, secret-draped religion of human sacrifice. I knew then that my time in Havenwood was running out. I was no longer just a curious outsider. I was a threat. I had uncovered the rotten foundational truth of their perfect little town, and they would not, could not, let me leave with that knowledge. My digging had disturbed a quiet order of things, and the pact, I suspected, demanded balance. The realization that I was the new tithe came with the ringing of the bell. I was in my cottage, frantically packing a bag, my hand shaking so badly I could barely zip it. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bloody, apocalyptic hues. And then it began, a low, resonant bong that echoed through the valley. It was the bell from the town square. Bong. It was a slow, deliberate tolling. It was a sound that vibrated not just in the air, but deep in the bones of the earth. Bong. It wasn't a funeral bell. It was a summons. I looked out the window. In the twilight, I could see figures emerging from the houses down the street. They moved with a slow, calm, inexorable purpose, and they were all walking in my direction. Their faces, what I could see of them, were blank, their friendly masks stripped away to reveal the grim, determined faces of executioners. I fled out the back door and into the woods. The forest, once a place of quiet solace, was now a labyrinth of grasping shadows and menacing shapes. I could hear them behind me, not crashing through the undergrowth, but moving with an unnerving, practiced silence. They knew these woods. This was their hunting ground. My only hope, my only conceivable path of escape, was to circle around a town. But as I ran, the tolling of the bell seemed to guide my pursuers, its resonant waves a form of sonar pinpointing my location. I stumbled out of the woods and onto the road, and my heart sank. I was on the western edge of town. I had run in a circle, and right in front of me, its iron gates gaping open like the maw of some great beast, was the memorial green. They were waiting for me. A semicircle of townspeople stood at the gate, their faces illuminated in the cold white light of a single bare bulb that hung over the entrance. Brenda from the diner was there, the gas station attendant, Mr. Abernathy, the librarian, looking more like a vulture than ever. They weren't holding weapons in the traditional sense. They were holding shovels, ropes, and thick canvas sacks. There was nowhere to run. They advanced on me, their movements slow and ritualistic. I was herded like a sheep to the slaughter through the gates and onto the perfect emerald grass. The bell continued its slow, hypnotic tolling, and as I was pushed towards the center of the green, the screams from below began to rise, louder and more insistent than ever before, as if in hungry, terrible anticipation. I was thrown to the ground, the air knocked from my lungs. I saw Brenda's face above me, her expression not one of malice, but of a grim, sorrowful necessity. "The pact must be honored," she said, her voice a flat, dead thing. "The valley must be fed." But as they pinned my arms and legs, a different sound cut through the air, a grating, metallic shriek. One of the men was using a heavy iron key to unlock something in the ground. A section of the perfect lawn I now saw was not lawn at all. It was a masterfully concealed trapdoor, a sod-covered slab of iron. As they heaved it open, a wave of cold, foul air washed over me, a charnel house stench of damp earth, decay, and profound ancient despair. It was the gateway to hell, and below, in the Stygian darkness, I could see a faint, shifting, phosphorescent glimmer, and I could hear the wet, scrabbling sounds of things moving in that final, desperate moment as they prepared to throw me into the pit. My mind, sharpened by pure terror, found an escape route. It wasn't a route for my body, but for my story, my phone. I had been recording my conversation with Old Man Hemlock, and the phone was still in my pocket, still connected to the cloud. With a final adrenaline-fueled surge, I twisted my body and managed to get a hand into my pocket. My fingers closed around the smooth, cool glass of the phone. I didn't have time to do anything else. As they lifted me, swinging me over the open pit, I hit the live stream button on a social media app I hadn't used in years. I didn't know if I had a signal. I didn't know if it would work. It was a final, desperate message in a bottle, thrown into the digital ocean. The last thing I saw before they let me go was the screen of my phone, flickering to life, the red live icon glowing like a single defiant drop of blood in the darkness. Then I was falling, The fall was short, a jarring impact that sent a bolt of agony through my leg. I landed on a floor of cold, damp, packed earth. The trapdoor slammed shut above me, plunging me into an absolute disorienting blackness. The bell had stopped. The air was thick, suffocating, and filled with the deafening, echoing symphony of the damned. The screams were all around me now, a physical pressure against my eardrums. My phone had survived the fall. Its screen was cracked, but the light from it cut a weak, pathetic beam into the oppressive dark. I scrambled back, pressing myself against a rough stone wall, and held the phone out like a sword. The light illuminated a scene from a madman's fever dream. I was in a wide circular chamber, the central hub of the mine, and from the dozens of tunnels that radiated outwards from the chamber, they were coming. They were no longer human. The decades, the century of being trapped in the living dark, had twisted and reshaped them. They were pale, desiccated things. Their skin stretched thin and translucent over their skeletal frames. Their hair was long and white and wispy, and their fingernails had grown into yellowed, curving talons that scraped against the stone floor. But their eyes were the worst part. They had no pupils, no irises. They were just two faintly glowing milky white orbs that stared at me with an expression of eternal, ravenous agony. They were the hungry ones, and I was the offering. They shuffled towards me, a slow, inexorable tide of living death, their mouths open in silent screams, their clawed hands reaching. My own scream was a raw, ragged tear in my throat. I was going to die here. I was going to be torn apart and consumed, and then I was going to become one of them. My own voice added to the subterranean chorus for all eternity. But as the first one reached me, its glowing eyes inches from my face, its breath a foul, grave-like exhalation, the light from my phone flickered across its face. It flinched. It recoiled from the light, raising a skeletal hand to shield its eyes, and let out a high-pitched, hissing shriek. The light, they were creatures of the absolute dark. The light hurt them. Hope, a wild, impossible thing, flared in my chest. I turned the phone's flashlight function on, and the beam, though weak, was like a searchlight in the Stygian gloom. I swept it across the chamber, and the advancing tide of figures fell back, hissing and shielding their faces, a writhing mass of pale limbs and glowing eyes. It bought me a moment. I scrambled to my feet, my injured leg screaming in protest, and chose a tunnel at random, plunging into the darkness, using my phone as both a light and a shield. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, the walls slick with a damp, foul-smelling slime. I could hear them behind me, their shuffling, scraping pursuit echoing in the confined space. I ran, stumbling, falling, my body a symphony of pain and terror. The tunnel twisted and turned, and every new corner threatened to reveal a dead end. The battery on my phone was at 7%. The light began to flicker, my shield against the encroaching dark growing weaker with every passing second. And then I saw it. Faintly, at the far end of the tunnel, a different kind of light. A small square patch of gray. Air. It was an old ventilation shaft, long forgotten, choked with weeds and roots, but it was a way out. The battery on my phone died. I was plunged back into absolute blackness, and the things behind me surged forward, their hissing growing louder. I ran the last few yards in the dark, my arms outstretched, and threw myself at the square of light. I clawed at the dirt and the roots, my fingers bleeding, and pulled myself up inch by agonizing inch, into the narrow vertical shaft. I could feel their talons scraping at the heels of my boots, but I kept climbing, pulling myself up towards the sky. I burst out of the ground into the cool, clean air of the deep woods, gasping and sobbing, covered in filth and blood. I was miles from the memorial green on the far side of the hill. I didn't look back. I just ran until the woods gave way to a highway, and I flagged down the first passing truck, a terrified, babbling madman who had just clawed his way out of his own grave. My live stream had worked. For 17 terrifying minutes, the world had watched a shaky, flickering feed of a man being thrown into a pit and then pursued by impossible creatures through a dark tunnel, his screams mingling with the screams of 100 others. The feed cut out, but it was enough. By the time the state police, spurred on by a viral video that was being called the most elaborate horror hoax ever staged, arrived in Havenwood, the town was empty. The houses were abandoned, as if the residents had simply vanished into thin air. They found a trap door in the memorial green. They found the tunnels. They found the bones of those who had crumbled to dust, and they found the others, the ones who still moved. The authorities have sealed the mine, and the official story is a bizarre, convoluted tale of a forgotten, isolated cult. No one wants to believe the truth. I am in a hospital now. They tell me I'm lucky to be alive. They are treating my physical wounds, but they have no cure for the wounds on my soul. My phone was recovered, its data intact. The recording of Old Man Hemlock, the live stream, the photos of the blank, perfect cemetery, I have my proof, but it has cost me my sanity. Because sometimes, late at night, in the sterile, quiet dark of my hospital room, I can still hear them. It's faint, just on the edge of my hearing, a muffled, desperate chorus. The screams have followed me, or maybe I've just finally learned to hear the sounds of all the other hidden places in the world, the places built on secrets and suffering. Maybe the whole world is a cemetery with no graves, and I am doomed to be the only one who can hear the screaming. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. I moved into a house where no mirrors stay on the walls. The listing was buried on page 12 of the Regional Housing Board, flagged with a single asterisk and a note in parentheses. As is tenant responsible for minor repairs, no pets, no mirrors. No mirrors? Weird. But the price, $395 a month for a 3-bedroom Victorian on the edge of town, was impossible to ignore. My divorce had bled me dry. My daughter Lily needed stability, a yard, a room of her own. I clicked contact before the rational part of my brain could catch up. The landlord, Mrs. Thorne, met me at the curb. She was tiny, bird-boned, with white hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes the color of weak tea behind thick glasses. She didn't shake my hand, just gestured with a gnarled finger toward the porch. Front door's sticky. Push hard. Windows draft. Fireplace is sealed. Don't try to open it. Kitchen works. Bathroom, mostly. And the mirrors, she said, her voice like dry leaves skittering on pavement, are gone, as stipulated. Gone? Like removed? Refused, she corrected. Everyone. Bolted, glued, wired, didn't matter. They came down, within the hour, sometimes the minute. She turned those pale eyes on me. You bring one in, it won't stay. Don't fight it. Don't ask why. Just don't. She handed me the keys, 2 brass ones cold and heavy, and walked away without another word, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel drive until she vanished around the side of the house, where a small cottage sat tucked beneath ancient oaks. The house itself was beautiful in a faded, melancholy way. Queen Anne style, with gingerbread trim peeling like sunburnt skin, a wraparound porch sagging gently toward the overgrown lilac bushes, and tall, narrow windows that watched the street like weary eyes. Inside, the air was cool, still smelling of beeswax, old paper, and beneath it all, the faint, sweet, acrid tang of burnt sugar. There were no mirrors, not in the hallway, not above the clawfoot tub, not in the bedroom closets. Just smooth, blank patches on the walls where they'd once hung, ghost rectangles of slightly darker wallpaper, or clean plaster where the paper had been stripped away entirely. Nails remained, though, rusty little sentinels jutting out like broken teeth. Lily, 6 years old and resilient beyond her years, ran through the empty rooms, laughing, claiming the smallest bedroom. The lilac room, she named it, for the bushes pressing against its window. I took the largest at the end of the hall. The master bedroom, it had a fireplace, stone, blackened with soot, and above it, nails, 4 of them, arranged in a perfect rectangle, a mirror's outline etched in absence. That first night, we ate takeout on the bare living room floor, the cardboard boxes our only furniture. Lily fell asleep against my shoulder, thumb in her mouth, breathing soft and even. I carried her to her room, tucked, her in with her worn stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hops. As I turned to leave, I glanced at the closet. The door was ajar. Inside, darkness, and a sound, not scratching, clicking, like fingernails tapping glass. I froze, waited. Silence. I closed the door gently, locked it. Day 2, I went to the hardware store, bought a small framed mirror, just 12 by 16, intended for Lily's dresser. Practical, necessary. She needs to brush her hair, tie her shoes. I hung it over her dresser with picture hooks and a level, made sure it was straight, stepped back. Perfect, I said. Lily nodded, brushing Mr. Hops's fur. I went downstairs to unpack the kitchen boxes. 10 minutes later, a crash. I sprinted upstairs. The mirror lay face down on the rug. The glass was intact, but the frame, the sturdy oak frame, was shattered, splintered into a dozen jagged pieces as if crushed by an immense, invisible fist. Lily stood by her bed, wide-eyed, clutching Mr. Hops. "It just fell," she whispered. "But it didn't fall, Daddy. It jumped." I picked it up. The back was smooth, no sign of impact, no loose hooks. The picture wire was unbroken. I swept up the wood, didn't mention it to Mrs. Thorne. Night 3, I woke at 2:17 a.m. A sound from the master bedroom. Scritch, 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 not on the wall. Inside the wall, behind the fireplace. I sat up, listened, nothing. Then a sigh, long, wet, exhausted, followed by a whisper, so faint it might have been the wind in the eaves. So tired of seeing her. I got up, walked to the fireplace, pressed my ear to the cold stone. Silence. Then, thump, a soft, heavy sound, like a sack of flour dropped onto a mattress. From the other side. I stepped back, looked up at the nail holes above the mantel. 4 points of darkness, waiting. Day 4, I tried a different approach. No frame, just the glass. I bought a sheet of plain mirror glass cut to fit and leaned it against a wall in my bedroom closet. Out of the way, not hung, just placed. A temporary solution, just to shave. At 1:03 a.m., I woke to the sound of shattering, not a crash, a cascade, like ice falling from a roof. I flicked on the light. The glass was on the floor, not broken. Unmade. The shards weren't random. They were arranged, in a circle, around my bare footprints on the rug. Each piece, no matter how small, reflected not the ceiling, not the wall, but me, asleep in bed, mouth open, one arm flung over my eyes, every angle, every perspective, even the back of my head. I swept it up with a dustpan, hand shaken, disposed of it in the outdoor bin. Didn't tell Lily. Night 5. The whispers returned, not just one voice, two, arguing, muffled, desperate. You promised. A woman's voice, young, terrified. Had to be sure. A man's voice, older, calm, terrible. It's not her. It has to be her. Then a sound that froze my blood, a child's sob, Lily's sob. I leapt from bed, ran to her room. She was asleep, peaceful. Mr. Hops tucked under her chin. But the closet door, the one I'd locked, was wide open. Inside, the darkness seemed thicker, deeper, and on the floor, near the threshold, small, bare footprints, not leading out, leading in. Day 6, I broke. I drove to the antique mall on the edge of town, found it in the back corner, behind a rack of moth-eaten fur coats, an oval mirror heavy in a tarnished silver frame. Victorian, probably original to the house. The dealer, a man with ink-stained fingers and no name tag, didn't ask questions, just named a price, $75, and wrapped it in brown paper without meeting my eyes. "It's been here a while," he muttered. "No one wants it." I hung it in the hallway, center of the stairwell, commanding height. Good light. It stayed for 12 minutes. Then, with no sound, no warning, it detached, not falling, floating. It drifted backward 6 inches from the wall, suspended to midair. The glass darkened, not fogged. Filled, like ink bleeding into water. A face emerged, not mine. A woman, mid-30s. Dark hair pulled back severely, eyes wide, bloodshot, filled with a terror so profound it felt like a physical blow. Her mouth moved. No sound came from the mirror, but in my head, clear, sharp, vibrating in my teeth. Don't let it wear her skin. Then the mirror dropped, shattered on the hardwood. The shards didn't scatter. They skittered, like beetles, all sliding toward the basement door at the end of the hall. I swept them up, locked the basement door, used a chair as a wedge. Night 7. Lily woke screaming, not from a nightmare, from the bathroom. I found her standing before the empty space above the sink, sobbing, pointing. "There's a lady, Daddy. She's in the wall. She's crying. She says, it's learning." I held her, rocking, whispering nonsense until her breathing slowed. As she drifted off, her small hand tightened on my shirt. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetie?" "The lady, she said her name is Clara." Clara. I went to the library. Microfiche, Cedar Hollow Gazette, October 1953, buried on page 7. Local couple reports. Daughter missing. Clara Evans, 34. Robert Evans, 36. Daughter, Eleanor, age 4. Last seen playing in the backyard of their newly purchased home, 138 Sycamore Lane, on the afternoon of October 12, 1953. Search parties combed the woods. No trace. Robert Evans, a carpenter, was questioned extensively. Alibis checked. No evidence. Case cold within weeks. A follow-up, November 1953. Robert Evans found dead in home. Cause, suicide, gunshot, note found. I only wanted her back. I thought if I made her perfect, she'd come home. No mention of Clara, no. Obituary, just gone. I scrolled further. Property records: 138 Sycamore Lane, sold in 1954 to a trust, renovated, resold, renovated again. Each time the listing noted, all mirrors removed per previous owner's request. Mrs. Thorne's name appeared on the trust documents. E. Thorne, trustee. Eleanor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the armchair in the living room, Lily breathing softly in her room down the hall, a baseball bat across my lap. 1 a.m. The house exhaled, a deep, shuddering sigh that vibrated the floorboards. The basement door, chair still wedged, creaked open an inch. Cold air poured out, not cellar damp cold. Refrigerator cold. I stood, walked to the door, pushed it open. The basement stairs descended into utter blackness. No light switch. I flicked on my phone flashlight. The beam caught the top step, not wood. Glass. A mosaic of shattered mirror shards, fused together, forming a staircase. Each piece reflected not the beam, but fragments of a scene. A little girl in a yellow dress, laughing, chasing a butterfly. A man's hands, rough, carpenter's hands, carefully placing a small shoe into a box. A woman's face, contorted in silent agony, pressing her palms against the inside of a wall. A dark, narrow space, straw on the floor, a single rusted nail jutting from the wood. The stairs led down. I took the first step. The glass didn't cut. It conformed, like walking on frozen water. Down. The air grew colder. The smell intensified. Burnt sugar, yes, but now layered with dust, old sweat, and the coppery tang of blood long dried. At the bottom, a single room, not a basement, a cell. Stone walls, dirt floor, a small barred window high up, caked with grime, and in the center a chair, wooden, straight-backed. On it a figure, not Clara, not Eleanor. Lily, my Lily, but wrong. Her eyes were open, glassy, unblinking. Her mouth was sewn shut with coarse black thread. Her skin wasn't skin, it was wax, pale, smooth, flawless, and behind her, him, Robert Evans, not a ghost, a presence, tall, gaunt, wearing stained overalls. His face was a ruin, eyes hollow, jaw slack, but his hands were steady, holding a bone-handled scalpel and a small pot of amber liquid. He looked at me, not with malice, with relief. "It's almost perfect," he whispered, his voice the dry rustle of dead leaves. "Just needs the eyes. Clara's eyes. But she hid them. In the walls, in the glass. She won't let me finish." He gestured to the walls. They weren't stone. They were covered, every inch, with mirrors, hundreds of them, shattered, cracked, whole, all reflecting the same thing: Clara trapped, screaming silently behind the glass, her hands pressed against the inside of every shard, her mouth open in a voiceless wail. "Don't let it wear her skin." Robert took a step toward Lily, toward his Eleanor. I lunged, swung the bat. It passed through him. Through. He didn't flinch, just smiled. A terrible, broken thing. "She's learning," he said, dipping the scalpel into the amber fluid. "The reflections, they teach it. How to move, how to speak, how to love. Soon she'll be ready. Soon Clara will stop fighting. She'll see this is better. This is forever." He raised the scalpel toward Lily's face. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned, ran back up the glass stairs, not out, to the kitchen, grabbed the largest pot, filled it with water, ran back down. He was leaning over Lily, the scalpel poised. I didn't hesitate. I threw the water, not at him, at the mirrors. The water hit the glass. Hissed. Not like water on hot metal, like water on acid. The mirrors screamed. A soundless vibration that shook my bones, made my teeth ache, sent blood trickling from my nose. The glass bubbled, clouded, cracked. Behind the fractures, Clara's face contorted, not in pain, in triumph. She pressed harder. The glass shattered inward, not falling, exploding. Shards flew, not outward, but into the room, into Robert Evans. They pierced him, dozens of them, embedding in his chest, his throat, his eyes. He didn't bleed. He unraveled. Wax sloughed off his face in gray sheets, revealing raw, glistening muscle beneath, then bone, then light. A cold white light that pulsed once, twice, then winked out. He collapsed, not a body, a pile of gray wax and splintered bone. The amber fluid spilled across the dirt floor, sizzled, evaporated. Lily gasped, sat up. The wax was gone. The stitches, gone. She blinked up at me, tears streaming. "Daddy?" There was a bad man and a lady. She held my hand. She said, "Run." I scooped her up, ran, up the stairs, out of the basement. I slammed the door, dragged a heavy oak dining table in front of it. Then I ran to Lily's room, packed a bag. "Time to go, sweetie." "But, Mr. Hops," I grabbed the rabbit. We were at the front door when the lights went out. Not a flicker, a snuff, like a candle blown out in a sealed room. The house went silent, too silent. No wind, no settling, just the sound of my own breath, ragged and loud. And beneath it, a new sound. Tap, tap, tap. From the hallway, 3 slow taps, then 3 fast, then 3 slow. SOS. I turned. The hallway was dark, but the nail holes above the master bedroom fireplace glowed, faintly, green, pulsing, like embers. The front door handle turned, not from outside, from inside the wood. The door didn't open. It breathed. The wood grain shifted, swirled, formed a face, Clara's face. Her eyes, real now, human, exhausted, locked onto mine. Her mouth moved, no sound, but the words formed in my mind, clear and cold. "It's still in the glass, it's in the house. It's in you now." I looked down at my hands. In the dim emergency light from the street outside, my palms were stained, not with blood, with silver. Tiny reflective flecks, like ground mirror. I rubbed them. They didn't come off. They sank in. Lily tugged my hand. "Daddy, why are your eyes shiny?" I looked at her. Her eyes, big, brown, innocent, were no longer reflecting the streetlight. They were reflecting me, but not as I was, as I would be. Taller, thinner, wearing stained overalls, holding a bone-handled scalpel, smiling. I dropped her hand, stumbled back, ran to the bathroom. The space above the sink was empty, but the porcelain sink itself, it was filled, not with water, with liquid mercury, thick, silvery, pulsing. My reflection stared back. Clara stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder, her lips at my ear. "Don't look away," she whispered, her voice finally audible, raw with decades of silence. "Don't let it see." "Her through your eyes." I closed my eyes, held Lily's hand tight, ran out the front door, down the porch steps, into the street. Didn't stop until we reached the all-night diner 3 blocks away. Sat in a booth, ordered 2 hot chocolates. Lily sipped hers, quiet, clutching Mr. Hops. I stared at my hands. The silver flecks were gone. But when I looked in the chrome napkin dispenser, my reflection smiled and winked. We didn't go back. Mrs. Thorne called the next day, left a message. "The house accepts its due. You'll come back. They always do." We moved to an apartment, concrete walls, no mirrors, just polished steel appliances. Lily started school, made friends, laughed. But at night, she wakes, stands before the stainless steel refrigerator door, staring, not at herself, at the reflection behind her. She never speaks, just points and whispers one word. Learning? I check the locks every night. I check the windows. I check myself. In the toaster, in the microwave door, in the dark screen of the turned-off TV. It's subtle, a tilt of the head, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a smile that doesn't reach the corners. It's learning how to move, how to speak, how to love. Clara's warning echoes in the silence between heartbeats. Don't let it wear her skin. But the worst part, I'm starting to wonder, what if it already has? What if the thing holding Lily's hand at night isn't me? What if it's just the house, learning, practicing, waiting for the day it gets the reflection just right, and the mirrors finally stay on the walls? With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. The room my landlord told me never to open. I needed a place to stay fast. My savings were down to 342 hours. My car had died on the shoulder of I-80 near Scranton, and my phone had been pinging warnings about overdue rent on my old apartment for 3 days straight. When I found the listing, a whole floor of a historic Victorian house, utilities included, available immediately for $450 a month, I didn't hesitate. It felt like divine intervention, or desperation masquerading as luck. The house stood on the edge of the old Greenwood Heights neighborhood, a once prosperous enclave of late 19th century homes now fraying at the seams. Most had been restored, gentrified, turned into boutique B&Bs or yoga studios. But 138 Holloway Lane hadn't. It loomed instead, a 3-story gabled monstrosity with peeling slate-gray paint, a sagging front porch, and soot-stained bay windows draped in yellowed lace. The yard was overgrown with waist-high Queen Anne's lace and thorny brambles, and the wrought iron fence hung off its hinges like broken teeth. The landlord, Mr. Alden, met me at the curb. He was in his late 70s, thin as a coat hanger, with milky eyes and hands that trembled even when still. He wore a threadbare tweed vest over a collarless shirt and smelled faintly of camphor and damp wool. He didn't shake my hand, just nodded, keys clinking in his palm like loose teeth in a skull. "You're the young man from the email," he said. His voice was dry, papery, like pages turning in an old ledger. "I am Jacob Reeves." He studied me for a long moment, as if weighing whether I was worth the effort. "3rd floor, back unit. Bathroom shared with the 2nd floor, though no one lives there anymore. Kitchen access is the hallway sink and mini-fridge. No stove, no oven. You bring your own hot plate if you need one." I nodded, already mentally adjusting my expectations. Still, $450. I could live like a monk for 6 months, save enough to get back on my feet. He led me up the creaking front steps, the wood groaning under each footfall like it remembered every person who'd ever climbed them, and none fondly. Inside, the air was thick and still, heavy with the scent of aged wood, mildew, and something else. Something faintly sweet, like old potpourri left too long in a sealed jar. The floorboards groaned as we ascended the narrow staircase. Each step dipped slightly in the center, worn down by decades of passage. The wallpaper, once burgundy flocking, was peeling in long, curling strips, revealing patches of lath and plaster beneath. In places, dark water stains bloomed like Rorschach blots. Faces, hands, screaming mouths if you stared too long. He stopped on the 3rd floor landing, 3 doors. Left, bathroom. Center, your room. Right, storage, keep locked. The right-hand door was different, thicker, dark oak, not pine like the others, iron hinges, black with age, and a padlock, new, gleaming, chrome, looped through a hasp screwed directly into the wooden frame. No keyhole, just the lock, a statement, not a suggestion. Mr. Alden followed my gaze, his trembling stilled for a moment. "That room," he said quietly, "you don't go in there." I blinked. "Okay. Storage, right?" "It's not storage." He turned to me, his pale eyes locking onto mine. "It's sealed. By city order, back in '79. Structural instability, they said, but I know better. You don't open it. You don't knock. You don't even lean against it. You pretend it isn't there. Understood?" The seriousness in his voice sent a prickle up my neck. "Understood," I said, though my mind was already cataloging the anomalies, the new lock on a door supposedly untouched since 1979, the lack of dust on the hasp, the way the wood around the frame looked smoother, like it had been recently handled. He handed me 2 keys, one for the front door, one for my room. "Rent's due." "The first, cash or money order, no checks, no electronic. You have problems, you call the number on the sheet. Don't come knocking after 9. I don't answer the door after dark." He left then, descending the stairs without another word. The front door clicked shut behind him, a soft, final sound, like a coffin lid settling. My room was small but clean. Narrow bed with a stiff mattress, a scarred oak desk, a single chair, a closet with a warped door that didn't quite close. The window looked out over the backyard, a tangled mess of dead hydrangeas and a collapsed trellis, but it had light and quiet, or so I thought. The first night, I slept like the dead. The second night, I woke at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of scratching. Not mice, not wind in the eaves. This was deliberate, rhythmic. Scritch, 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 pause, scritch, scritch, scritch. It came from the wall behind my bed. I lay frozen, listening, heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't constant. It would stop for 30 seconds, then resume. Always the same pattern. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. Morse code? I didn't know Morse, but it felt intentional, communicative. I sat up slowly, swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards were cold. I pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. I waited. 10 seconds, 20, then thump. A soft, heavy sound like a sack of flour dropped from waist height. From the other side, from his side. The sealed room. I jerked back. My breath came in shallow gasps. Coincidence, I told myself. House settling. Old pipes. Something had fallen off a shelf inside, except Mr. Alden said it wasn't storage, said nothing was in there. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day I tried to distract myself, unpacked my meager belongings, wiped down the desk, hung my few shirts in the closet. Every time I passed the locked door, I felt it, the weight of it. Not physical weight. Something else. A pressure, like standing too close to a high-voltage transformer, a low hum in the fillings of my teeth. At dusk, I went downstairs to use the shared bathroom. Passing the second-floor landing, I saw something new, a dark stain on the ceiling above the sealed room's doorframe, about the size of a dinner plate. Not water, too dark, almost black, and it was damp. I reached up, touched it. Sticky. I pulled my fingers back. In the dim hallway light, the residue looked rust-colored. I sniffed. Metallic. Iron-rich. Blood. My stomach turned. I scrubbed my hand on my jeans, heart pounding. I didn't mention it to anyone. Who would I tell, Mr. Alden? He'd probably say it was tan and bleed from old wood. And maybe he'd be right. Old houses do strange things. But that night, the scratching returned, louder, closer, like fingernails, long, brittle fingernails dragging slowly down the inside of the wall. Skrork. Then a pause, a wet, clicking sound, like a tongue pulling free from the roof of a mouth. Then whispering, not words, not at first. Just breath, shallow, ragged, in and out, right against the plaster. So close I could almost feel the warmth of it on my cheek. I pressed my ear to the wall again. Cold, a voice rasped. Female, young, exhausted. I recoiled. Silence. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, nothing. I told myself it was the wind whistling through a crack, a loose wire vibrating in the wall cavity, my own exhaustion conjuring phantoms. But I didn't sleep. By the 4th night, the whispers had words, not full sentences, fragments, pleas. Let me out. It's not locked for me. He didn't mean to. They came between 1:30 and 3 a.m., always the same window, always the same exhausted, trembling voice, always ending with a sound, a soft, guttural sob, before fading into silence. I started recording. I propped my phone against the wall, voice memo running, night 5. I lay in bed, eyes wide, open, listening. 1:48 a.m. The scratching began. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. Then the whisper, Jacob. My blood turned to ice. It knew my name. I lunged for the phone, stopped the recording, played it back. Static, faint scratching, no voice. I played it again, louder, still nothing but noise. But I'd heard it, clear as day. Jacob, coincidence, wishful thinking, sleep paralysis, hallucination creeping into waking hours? That afternoon, I broke. I went to the public library downtown, a squat brick building that smelled of disinfectant and old paper, and asked the elderly librarian if she knew anything about 138 Holloway Lane. She looked up from her desk, glasses sliding down her nose. The Holloway place? Oh, dear. Yeah, old Victorian. Landlord's an older man. Alden? Silas Alden. Lives in the carriage house out back. Keeps to himself. She lowered her voice. That house, it's got a history. She brought me a microfiche. Real. Greenwood Gazette, April 12th, 1979. Headline, Local woman missing after argument with landlord's son. The article was brief. Eleanor Voss, 24, last seen April 8, 1979, entering 138 Holloway Lane to view a rental unit. Reported missing by her roommate 2 days later. Police questioned Silas Alden and his son, Daniel Alden, 22. Daniel claimed he'd shown her the third-floor unit. She'd declined and left. No evidence of foul play. Case went cold. A follow-up 2 months later. Daniel Alden found dead in family home. Cause, accidental fall downstairs. Autopsy revealed high levels of barbiturates and alcohol. Silas Alden inherited the property, put it up for rent shortly after. I sat back, nausea rising. Eleanor Voss, the voice in the wall. He didn't mean to. I scrolled further, buried in a real estate column, a footnote. City inspection of 138 Holloway Lane following tenant complaint cited structural concerns in third-floor rear unit. Room, sealed per municipal order, April 24th, 1979. The date matched Mr. Alden's story, but structural concerns after a missing woman and a dead son? I dug deeper. Old property records, tax filings. The house had never been condemned. No permits filed for structural repairs in 79, or ever. The lock wasn't for safety. It was containment. That night, I didn't wait for the whispers. At 1 a.m., I stood before the sealed door. The chrome padlock gleamed in the moonlight filtering through the hallway window. The wood around the hasp was smooth, polished by frequent handling. Mr. Alden came up here regularly. I pressed my palm flat against the door. Cold, not room temperature cold. Refrigerator cold, the kind of cold that leaches heat from your skin in seconds, and beneath that, a vibration. Faint, but unmistakable, a slow, steady thrumming, like a heart, a huge, tired heart. Thump, thump, thump. Then, from the other side, a sigh, long, relieved. "You're here." I jumped back. The voice wasn't muffled by the wall this time. It came through the door. Clear, present. "I've been waiting so long." I ran, locked myself in my room, wedged the desk chair under the doorknob, sat on the bed, knees to chest, staring at the wall between my room and hers. Nothing happened. No scratching, no whispers, just silence. And the cold, it seeped under my door. A creeping frost that made my breath fog in the warm April air. I didn't sleep. I watched the clock. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4:15 a.m., at 5:03 a.m., sunrise bleeding gray light through the window. There was a knock, not on my door, on the sealed door. 3 soft raps. Tap, tap, tap. Then a voice. Different now, calmer, stronger. "Jacob, please, just open it a crack. I only want to see the light." I didn't move. "He lied to you. It's not dangerous. It's me." "I'm not dangerous." Another pause. "I just want to go home." The raw grief in those words undid me. My eyes burned. I thought of Eleanor Voss, 24 years old, looking for an apartment full of hope. Trapped for 47 years. I stood, walked to my door, listened. Silence. I crept into the hallway. The sealed door stood as before, lock gleaming, but the air thicker, heavier, and the cold intense now, like standing in front of an open freezer. I reached out, stopped inches from the wood. "Don't," a voice in my head screamed. "This is how it starts. This is how you become part of the house." But another voice, quieter, older, whispered, "She's been alone for longer than you've been alive." I touched the door. The cold bit deep. My fingers went numb instantly, and then I felt it, a hand, on the other side, pressing back, fingers aligning with mine, palm to palm, separated only by 2 inches of oak and decades of silence. A sob broke from my throat. "Please," she whispered, "just the lock." Looked at the padlock. New. Chrome. Standard hardware store issue. I had a multi-tool in my duffel, a small pair of bolt cutters in the side pocket, left over from a camping trip last summer. I went back to my room. Got it. Stood before the door again. The thrumming had stopped. The cold lessened slightly. It was waiting. I slid the cutters around the shackle, squeezed. The metal groaned. "No," I thought. "This is insane. You're about to open a door sealed for a reason." But my hands moved anyway. Click. The lock fell open. I lowered the cutters, reached for the hasp. My fingers trembled. I lifted it, pushed. The door didn't swing open. It resisted, just slightly, like something soft was pressed against the other side. I pushed harder. It gave, an inch. A breath of air, frigid, smelling of dust and dried roses and something faintly coppery, washed over me. Darkness yawned beyond the crack. Then a sound, not a whisper, a laugh, low, guttural, wrong. It wasn't Eleanor's voice. It was deeper, older, layered, like multiple voices speaking at once, slightly out of sync. "Finally, It sighed. The door flew open. I stumbled back, falling hard on my ass, the bolt cutters clattering away. The room beyond wasn't empty. It wasn't full of furniture or boxes or debris. It was occupied. The walls, every inch, were covered in writing. Not scribbles, not frantic scrawls. Neat, precise, looping cursive, thousands of lines, millions of words, covering the ceiling, the floorboards, the inside of the door I'd just opened. All the same phrase repeated over and over in fading ink and fresh blood alike. I am still here. In the center of the room stood a chair, wooden, straight-backed. On it sat a figure, tall, thin, dressed in rotted 1970s floral print, a dress once yellow, now stained brown with age and worse. Her hair was long, matted, hanging in greasy ropes over her face. She didn't move, didn't breathe, but her head slowly, impossibly tilted toward me. The hair parted. Her face wasn't decayed. It was preserved, pale, smooth, unnervingly intact. But her eyes were gone, not empty sockets, not decayed, sealed. Thin, translucent membranes covered the lids like cataracts, but thicker, pulsing faintly, rhythmically. And beneath them, movement, something shifting, writhing. She smiled. Her lips cracked open, revealing blackened gums and teeth filed to points. "You shouldn't have opened it," she said, her voice now a chorus of whispers, all ages, all genders, all terrified. "But thank you." She stood, too smoothly, too jointlessly. Her limbs didn't bend right. Her elbows reversed as she raised her arms. The membranes over her eyes bulged. Pop! They split. Not blood, not fluid. Things spilled out, pale, segmented, blind things, like grubs, but longer, thinner, with too many legs, tumbled down her cheeks, writhing, seeking. They hit the floor, scattered, rushed toward me. I scrambled backward, crab-walking, my legs numb with terror. The door slammed shut behind me. I hadn't touched it. The lock, still on the floor, rattled, then reformed. The cut shackle knitting back together with a sound like grinding bone. I was trapped in the hallway with her. She stepped over the threshold. The hallway lights flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness. Only the faint glow from my open bedroom door 10 feet away. She didn't walk. She unfolded. Her limbs extended, joints dislocating, reattaching, stretching like taffy, until she filled the hallway, her torso elongating, her arms splitting at the elbows, new hands sprouting, fingers lengthening into bone-white talons. The grubs swarmed my ankles, cold, wet, biting. I screamed, kicking, scrambling toward my room, made it, slammed the door, turned the lock, leaned against it, sobbing. Silence. Then a slow, wet drag along the hallway floor. Stop. A pause. Then tap on my door. Tap, tap, tap. "Jacob," she cooed. Eleanor's voice again, sweet, pleading. "Let me in. I'm so tired." I slid down the door, hugging my knees. My phone. Where was my phone? On the desk. I crawled, grabbed it. No signal, of course. I opened the voice memo app. Held it toward the door, recorded, just in case. The tapping stopped. The dragging resumed. Closer, closer. It stopped outside my door. Silence. Then the knob turned. Slowly, the lock held. For now. I heard breathing, wet, phlegmy, on the other side. Then a whisper right against the wood. "You think locks matter?" A crack. Sharp, splintering. The door frame groaned. Another crack. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The knob rattled violently. I backed into the corner, phone clutched like a talisman. The door bowed inward. The lock screamed. Crack. The door flew. Open. She stood there, not elongated now, just Eleanor. Hair brushed back, face clean, eyes wide, brown, human. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please," she sobbed. "He's coming. He'll punish me again, hide me just for a little while." She held out her hand. In the hallway behind her, nothing. Just the empty landing, the bathroom door ajar, the sealed room's door shut, padlock gleaming. Had I imagined it all? The grubs, the unfolding, the writing? She looked so real, so broken, so human. I hesitated, just for a second, long enough. Her smile widened, too wide, her jaw unhinged with a wet snap, stretching down to her collarbone. Inside her mouth, rows of needle teeth, and behind them, eyes, dozens of them, blinking, watching. I threw the phone. It passed right through her, shattered against the far wall. She laughed, a sound like glass breaking underwater. Then she lunged, not at me, at the wall. Her hand plunged into the plaster, through it, like it was smoke. She pulled, the wall tore open, not brick, not lath, flesh, thick, veined, pulsing flesh. Behind it, a cavity, dark, and from within, movement. Shapes, figures, dozens of them, pale, emaciated, naked, all facing the wall, all scratching. Their fingers, long, black-nailed, raked at the inner surface of the house skin. One turned. Its face was smooth, featureless, except for a mouth, a wide, lipless gash. It opened and screamed, a sound that wasn't sound, but a pressure, a wave of pure despair that hit me like a physical blow, knocking me to my knees, blood trickling from my nose. Eleanor stepped back, gesturing grandly at the horror behind her. "This is my family now," she whispered, her jaw snapping shut. "Would you like to join us?" I crawled backward, toward the window. It was old, single pane, painted shut. I grabbed the desk chair, swung. Glass exploded inward. Cold night air rushed in. I didn't look back. I climbed onto the sill, 3 stories up. The drop was nothing compared to what waited behind me. I jumped, landed hard on the overgrown lawn, ankle twisting, pain lancing up my leg. But I rolled, scrambled up, limped toward the street. I didn't stop until I reached the bus stop 3 blocks away, gasping, bleeding, my hands raw and shaking. A passing cruiser slowed. The officer rolled down his window. "You okay, son?" I tried to speak. No sound came out. He took one look at my face, at the blood, the terror, and opened the back door. "Get in!" At the station, they took my statement, called Mr. Alden. He arrived in slippers and a robe, trembling more than usual. "Boy's got a vivid imaginations," he muttered to the sergeant. "Told him not to go near that room. Told him." They checked the house. Found nothing. No writing on the walls, no chair, no Eleanor. Just an empty, dusty room with a broken padlock on the floor. Mr. Alden replaced it on the spot. New lock, shiny chrome. "They'll let you back in tomorrow," the sergeant said, handing me a cup of terrible coffee. "Nothing there, son, just an old house, old memories." I didn't go back. I slept on a bench in the bus station. But at 1:30 a.m., as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, I heard it, faint, from the direction of Holloway Lane. Scritch, 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 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. Then a whisper, carried on the night wind, curling around the brick buildings, slipping under the station doors. "Jacob." I looked down at my hands. In the fluorescent glare, my palms were stained, not with blood, with ink. Faint, looping, cursive, already drying. "I am still here." I tried to rub it off. It wouldn't fade. I looked again. The words were moving, shifting, reforming, becoming. I am coming. Outside, a car engine turned over, headlights swept across the window. A black sedan, old boxy from the 70s, idled at the curb. The passenger window rolled down. Mr. Alden wasn't driving. In the driver's seat, silhouetted, face in shadow, someone taller, thinner. One hand rested on the wheel, long fingers, too many knuckles. The other hand lifted, waved slowly, then pointed, not at me, at my chest. I looked down. Beneath my shirt, something pulsed, a faint, rhythmic thump. Thump, thump, thump. The same as the door, the same as a heart in the wall. The sedan drove away. I sat on the bench. I didn't run. What's the point? It's not in the house anymore. It's in me. I can feel it settling, nesting, rewriting my bones from the inside out. The whispers have changed. They don't come from Holloway Lane. They come from behind my eyes. When I close them, I see the room, the writing, the chair, the figures in the wall, and Eleanor no longer pleading, smiling, waiting, patient. Because she knows. The lock was never on the door. It was on me, and I opened it. Now it's just a matter of time. The hunger's starting, not for food, for silence, for the quiet behind the walls, for the scratching to stop, for the door to open, all the doors, and let the family in. I hear them now, in the vents, in the pipes, in the hollow spaces between the walls of this bus station, scratching, whispering, calling my name. They know I'm close. They know I'm ready. I'm writing this on my phone, battery at 3%, signal none. But it doesn't matter. It'll get out. It always does, just like the words on my skin, just like the thing in my chest. Thump, thump, louder now. Soon, very soon, I have to go. The door's opening, not the one behind me, the one inside. And it's not locking. It's unfolding. God help me, God help anyone who reads this. Don't look for 138 Holloway Lane. It's not there anymore. The city demolished. It last week. Condemned. Structural instability. They found things in the walls, things they wouldn't talk about, but the foundation's still there, and the basement, and the room. It wasn't on those blueprints. They missed it, because it's not in the house. It's what the house is made of. I can hear the bulldozers idling outside the station. They're here for me, not to take me away, to deliver me back home. The door's almost open, the light's so bright, so beautiful, so cold. I'm not afraid anymore. I understand now. The lock wasn't to keep her in. It was to keep us out. Until we were ready, until we opened. Forgive me. I have to let them in. I have to. The door is open. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. The nursery upstairs still plays lullabies, but no children ever lived here. I should have turned back at the mailbox. It leaned like a drunk against the overgrown hydrangeas, its red paint blistered and peeling, the brass number 7 hanging by one screw. Blackwood House. The name on the Airbnb listing, historic Victorian gem, grand views, perfect for writers seeking solitude, sounded majestic. In person it looked like a tomb that had forgotten its own funeral, but the price was impossible to ignore. $38 a night for an entire house, deep in the Blue Ridge foothills, no neighbors for a mile in any direction. My advance from the publisher had vanished faster than steam on a winter morning, and my agent's latest email, "Arthur, the manuscript is due in 42 days. Let's not discuss extensions again," still glowed on my cracked phone screen. Desperation makes fools of us all. So I ignored the way the trees seemed to lean inward over the driveway, blocking the late afternoon sun, and I ignored the silence. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of silence that feels like held breath. The key was under a cracked garden gnome, its ceramic smile chipped, one eye missing. The front door opened with a groan that sounded like pain. The air inside hit me. Dust, old wood, and beneath it, that damp mineral smell. Wet stone and cold iron. Standard for old houses, I told myself. Just needs airing out. The listing photos had been staged, bright, filtered, focusing on the ornate staircase, the bay window in the parlor. Reality was dimmer, heavier. High ceiling swallowed light. Wallpaper, once rich burgundy damask, peeled in long curling strips. Furniture huddled under yellowed sheets like sleeping ghosts. No Wi-Fi password on the fridge, no welcome note. Just a single sheet of paper, taped to the dusty mantel. Welcome. Utilities functional. Heat is temperamental. Wood stove in kitchen. Upstairs, master, study, nursery. Do not enter nursery. Unless absolutely necessary. Monsieur Blackwood. Nursery. The word snagged in my mind. Why designate a nursery in a rental? And why the warning? Unless absolutely necessary. Necessary for what? Changing a non-existent baby? I dropped my duffel in the master bedroom, a cavernous space with a four-poster bed draped in a faded quilt. The window faced the encroaching woods. No view, just darkness gathering between the trees. I checked my phone. 1 bar. Flickered. Died. Dinner was a can of beans heated on the gas stove. Functional, surprisingly. The kitchen was the only room that felt vaguely lived in. A scarred wooden table, mismatched chairs, a wood stove radiating a welcome, dry heat. As I ate, the house settled around me. Floorboards sighed, pipes ticked, normal sounds. I repeated it like a prayer. Then, just as I scraped the last of the beans from the can, I heard it. Faint, tinny, melodic, a music box. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. It came from upstairs. I froze. Spoon halfway to my mouth. Twinkle, twinkle is ubiquitous. A phone notification? But my phone was dead. A radio left on? I'd seen no electronics, just dusty lamps and a rotary phone on the hall table. The tune played through, simple, slightly off-key, the notes thin and metallic, and ended with a soft click. Silence rushed back in, thicker than before, probably old wiring. A speaker somewhere triggered by temperature change? Heat from the stove affecting the circuit? I forced myself to finish eating, my ears straining. Nothing. Just the tick-tick-tick of the stove. Cooling. I decided to explore. Get familiar. Master bedroom. Done. Study. Small. Desk. Chair. Empty bookshelves. Just dust and shadows. Then the third door at the end of the hall. The nursery. It looked like the others. Dark wood, tarnished knob. But the air around it felt different. Colder. Not drafty cold. Still cold. Like the air inside hadn't moved in decades. The sign on the mantel echoed, "Do not enter nursery unless absolutely necessary." Curiosity, that fatal human itch, overrode caution. I grasped the knob. It turned easily. Too easily. I pushed the door open. The smell hit first. Baby powder. Not the modern chemical kind. The old-fashioned talcum-heavy scent. Cloying and sweet. Layered over the deeper damp and dust. It was startlingly present, as if someone had shaken a bottle moments before. The room was small, dominated by a white iron crib in the center, its mattress bare. A wooden rocking horse stood in the corner, its paint chipped, one glass eye cracked. A changing table with peeling enamel. A low bookshelf held faded cloth books. Goodnight moon, the very hungry caterpillar, their spines cracked. On the wall, a framed print of a smiling sun, its yellow faded to a sickly ochre. And on a small claw-footed table beside the crib, a music box. Rectangular, walnut veneer, tarnished brass inlay. It looked antique, well cared for, utterly out of place. Amidst the decay, its lid was closed. I stepped inside, the floorboards silent beneath my sneakers. The cold intensified, raising goosebumps on my arms. I approached the music box. No visible latch, just a smooth, seamless lid. I touched it. The wood was ice cold. As my fingertip brushed the brass inlay, the lid sprang open with a soft snick. Inside, a tiny, intricate cylinder studded with pins. No figure, just the mechanism. And as the lid opened, the cylinder began to turn. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. The sound was louder here, clearer, yet still carrying that thin, metallic fragility. It filled the small room, bouncing off the bare walls. I stared transfixed as the pins engaged the comb, producing the familiar, haunting melody. It played through, ending with the same soft click. The cylinder stopped. The lid snapped shut. Silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. How? It hadn't been wound. I hadn't touched a key. I hadn't even pressed it. Just a brush of my finger. I backed out of the room, pulling the door shut firmly behind me. My hands were shaking. Coincidence. Spring mechanism triggered by movement. Temperature differential. The excuses felt flimsy. Paper shields against a rising tide of dread. I spent the evening in the kitchen, stove roaring, laptop open on the table. The blank document glared back. Chapter 1. I typed 2 sentences, deleted them. The silence pressed in, heavy and watchful. Every creak from upstairs made me flinch. I kept waiting for the music box. It didn't play. Exhaustion finally won. I took a quick, lukewarm shower in the clawfoot tub, water pressure weak, pipes groaning, and headed for the master bedroom. As I passed the nursery door, I paused. It was slightly ajar. I was certain I'd closed it. Firmly, I pushed it shut again, harder this time. Click. The latch caught. I slept fitfully. Dreams of cold rooms and silent cribs. Woke at 3:17 a.m., drenched in sweat despite the chill. Heart races for no reason I could name. Then I heard it. Not the music box. A lullaby. A woman's voice. Soft, breathy, achingly tender. Singing wordless nonsense syllables. Hush-a-bye, don't you cry? But the tune was unmistakably Brahms' lullaby. It came from the nursery. I lay frozen. Blankets pulled to my chin, listening. The voice wasn't loud. It was intimate, like someone was leaning over a crib, singing directly to a child just feet away. It held a depth of sorrow that made my throat tighten, a love so profound it bordered on pain. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, then faded, dissolving into the silence like smoke. No music box. Click. Just gone. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Listened until dawn painted the ceiling gray. Morning brought weak sunlight and a desperate need for normalcy. Coffee. Black. Strong. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, forcing words onto the page. Chapter 1. Again. The house on Sycamore Street looked ordinary. I deleted it. Blackwood House loomed. Deleted. My fingers felt stiff, clumsy. Tap. I jumped. Coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug. Tap, tap. From upstairs, from the nursery, not the music box, not the voice. This was rhythmic, deliberate, like fingernails. Lightly tapping on the inside of the crib's iron bars. Tap, 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 tap. I set the mug down carefully. My pulse roared in my ears. Animal, squirrel in the walls, bird in the chimney. But squirrels didn't tap in rhythm. Birds didn't sound so patient. The tapping stopped. Silence. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Maybe it was over. Maybe the night terrors were just that. Terrors of the night. I needed air, real air. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the back door. French doors leading to a neglected patio. They were stiff, swollen in the frame. I wrestled them open, the wood groaning in protest. The backyard was a tangle of weeds and skeletal rose bushes. At the far edge, near the tree line, stood a small stone structure. A shed? I walked towards it, crunching on dead leaves. It wasn't a shed, it was a mausoleum. Small, square, built of the same gray fieldstone as the house. Ivy choked its base. A wrought iron gate, rusted shut, barred the entrance. Through the bars I could see a single stone slab inside. No inscription, just a smooth, dark rectangle. A family crypt? For who? The listing mentioned the Blackwoods owned it for generations, but M.C. Blackwood sounded like a property manager, not a descendant. A cold wind snaked through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. I turned back toward the house and froze. In the upstairs window, the window of the nursery, a figure stood, small, pale, indistinct, like smoke given momentary shape behind a grimy glass, watching me. My breath caught. I blinked. Hard. The figure was gone. Just the empty window, the peeling paint of the sill, the dark interior beyond. Trick of the light. Shadow. Branch. Moving. The rationalizations were automatic, rote, but my legs wouldn't move. My skin felt too tight. I fled back inside, slamming the French doors, leaning against them, chest heaving. Okay. Time to leave. Screw the deposit. Screw the manuscript. I grabbed my duffel, shoved in my laptop, my notes, the half-finished manuscript. My hands were slick with sweat. I needed to get to the car. Now. I sprinted for the front door, fumbling the key from my pocket. It slid into the lock. I turned it. It didn't budge. I turned it again. Harder. Nothing. The deadbolt was thrown. From the inside, panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. I rattled the knob. Solid. I pounded on the heavy wood. Hello? Is someone there? My voice sounded thin, ridiculous. Silence. I ran to the kitchen, tried the back door. Same thing. Locked tight. The windows, sash windows, old and painted shut. I grabbed a chair, smashed the lower pane of the nearest one. Glass rained down. I reached through, fumbling for the latch. It was padlocked. From the outside, a whimper escaped me. Trapped. I sank to the floor, back against the cabinet, duffel bag clutched to my chest like a shield. The rational world had dissolved. This wasn't faulty wiring. This wasn't imagination. This was intention. The house held me, and it wanted me to go upstairs. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the frantic drumming of my heart. Then faintly, from above, click, the music box lid opening. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. The melody drifted down the stairs, clear and cold. It didn't stop at the end. It started again and again. A loop, insistent, summoning. I couldn't stay on the floor. I couldn't stay in the kitchen. The music was a hook in my chest, reeling me in. I stood up. My legs trembled. I walked to the bottom of the staircase. The ornate banister felt like ice under my sweaty palm. Twinkle, twinkle. Step by step, I climbed. Each tread groaned under my weight. the sound swallowed by the relentless tinny lullaby. The air grew colder with every step. The smell of baby powder intensified, mixing with the damp stone smell until it was almost nauseating. I reached the top. The hallway stretched before me, the master door, the study door, and at the end, the nursery door. It was wide open. The music poured out, louder now, filling the corridor. I walked towards it, drawn by a force stronger than fear. I stopped in the doorway. The room was exactly as I'd left it. Crib, rocking horse, changing table, bookshelf. Except the music box was open, its cylinder spinning, pins clicking against the comb, and the white iron crib. It was rocking, slowly, gently, as if someone had just leaned over and given it a soft push. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The rocking slowed, stopped. The music box played its final notes. Click. The lid snapped shut. Silence crashed down, heavier than before. Then, from inside the crib, a sound, a soft sigh. Not a cry, not a gurgle, a sigh of contentment, of expectation. My vision swam. The edges of the room darkened. The cold wasn't just on my skin anymore. It was in my lungs, in my bones. I took a step forward, into the room, towards the crib. My hand, acting of its own accord, reached out, not towards the music box, towards the crib's rail. I gripped the cold iron and looked inside. The mattress was bare, white ticking, stained with age. But in the very center, pressed into the thin padding, was an indentation, a perfect, small, oval-shaped depression, like the impression left by a head, a baby's head. Beside it, two smaller indentations, where tiny hands might rest. The sigh came again, closer this time, right beside my ear. A breath, cold as a winter grave, brushed my neck. Hush-a-bye. The voice wasn't upstairs anymore. It was here, in the room, singing to the empty space, to the impression at the mattress, to me. I understood then, with a clarity that froze my soul. No children ever lived here, but one had died here, born too soon, or too sick, or lost in the night, and the mother, M. Blackwood, Margaret, Martha, had never let go. Her grief had seeped into the stones, the wood, the very air. It had bound her spirit to this room, to this crib, to the ritual of the lullaby, the music box, the rocking. She wasn't warning guests away from danger. She was warning them away from herself, from the desperate, eternal need to care for the child she lost, from the compulsion to find someone, anyone, to stand beside her in the nursery, to witness the empty crib, to acknowledge the space where her baby should have been, to be the audience for her endless, sorrowful lullaby. The sigh came again, right against my temple, a plea wrapped in ice. My body moved. I didn't will it. It just happened. I lifted my hand from the crib rail, not to flee, to push. Gently, the crib began to rock, slowly, steadily, back and forth, back and forth. As it moved, the music box lid sprang open. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. The melody filled the room, warm and bright and utterly, devastatingly wrong. From the corner, near the cracked-eyed rocking horse, a new sound began, a woman's soft sob, not of anguish, of relief. "Thank you," the sob seemed to say. "Thank you for seeing him." I kept pushing the crib, rocking it, rocking the empty space, rocking the impression in the mattress. The sobbing softened, merged with the music box. Twinkle, twinkle. The cold lessened, just a fraction. A fragile warmth, like weak sunshine, touched my back. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my marrow, colder and more final than any locked door, that I would never leave Blackwood House. The manuscript was forgotten. The deadline meant nothing. My hands had found their purpose. They knew the rhythm. They would rock and rock and rock. Long after the music box wound down, long after the sobs faded, long after the last echo of the lullaby dissolved into the silence, waiting for the next sigh, for the next cold breath on my neck, for the next time the crib needed pushing. The nursery was no longer empty. It had a caretaker. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. Something keeps rocking the chair beside my bed and whispering my name. At first, I thought it was the house. Old houses settle, floorboards sigh, foundations shift, pipes knock. I knew that. I'd grown up in a drafty Victorian where the radiators sang opera at midnight and the attic stairs groaned like a dying man climbing to his own funeral. So when I moved into the cottage on Sycamore Ridge, rent, $700 a month, utilities included. Charming, rustic, needs minor TLC. I expected quirks, creaks, drafts that smelled of damp earth and distant rain. I did not expect the chair. It was already there when I arrived, not part of the listing, not mentioned in the brief, almost reluctant tour given by the landlord, Mrs. Gable. A woman in her late 70s, with silver hair pinned in a tight coil and eyes that darted away whenever I asked questions about the previous tenant. She handed me the key, said, "Just keep the garden trimmed, and don't mind the chair." Then hurried back to her car like the cottage might bite her. The chair sat in the corner of the bedroom opposite the bed. A rocking chair, not antique, not valuable, just there. A simple, straight-backed wooden rocker, stained a deep walnut, the runners worn smooth from years, decades of motion. The seat was padded with faded burgundy fabric slightly frayed at the edges. On the arms, faint indentations. The ghostly impression of elbows. It looked comfortable, lived in, like someone had just gotten up. I didn't move it. Why would I? It wasn't in the way. And honestly, after hauling my meager belongings, a mattress, a duffel, a box of books, my laptop, and the framed photo of my sister Mara, I was too exhausted to rearrange furniture. I pushed my suitcase under the bed, hung 2 shirts in the closet, plugged in my phone, and collapsed onto the mattress. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. No traffic, no distant sirens, just the wind in the pines behind the cottage and the occasional plink of water dripping from the gutter into the rain barrel outside. I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the silence. I woke at 2:17 a.m., not to an alarm, to a sound. Scritch, 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 rhythmic, gentle. The runners of the rocking chair moving back and forth on the hardwood floor. I opened my eyes. The moonlight through the window painted a silver rectangle on the floor. The chair sat within it, rocking slowly, steadily. Scritch, scritch, scritch. No one was in it. I lay still, breath held. It rocked for exactly 43 seconds, then stopped. Silence. I told myself it was the wind, a draft lifting the curtain, nudging the chair, old wood expanding, contracting, physics, not presence. The second night, it happened again. 2:17 a.m., scritch, scritch, scritch. This time, I watched. The chair began to move on its own. No gust, no tremor. A smooth, deliberate arc. Back, forth, back, forth. I sat up. I sat. Hello? My voice cracked. The rocking didn't stop, didn't speed up, just continued. Then a whisper, so faint I thought it was the blood rushing in my ears. Ethan, my name, spoken in a voice I knew, not Mara's, not my mother's, my own, but softer, slower, like it was being pulled through water. "Ethan," I snapped on the lamp. The chair was still, empty, the room, just a room. I got up, walked to it, ran my hand over the seat, cold, dry, no indent. I dragged it to the closet, shoved it inside, and closed the door. Locked it, not with a key, but by wedging a book beneath the door. I slept with the light on. It didn't help. At 2:17 a.m., the scrit, scrit, scrit began again, not from the closet, from inside the closet, muffled but unmistakable. Then the whisper, louder, closer. "Ethan, let me out." I didn't move, didn't breathe. The rocking grew more urgent. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The closet door rattled. The book slid an inch. I threw on jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove to the 24-hour diner 10 miles away. I didn't go back until noon. The closet door was open. The chair sat in its original spot, as if it had never moved. The third night, I set up my phone, propped it on the dresser, facing the chair, recorded video, audio on, went to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., the rocking began. The video captured it all. The chair still. Then movement, a slow, smooth tilt backward, then forward. Scritch, a pause. Then my name, not a whisper this time. Clear, soft. "Ethan." My voice, but not me. Sadder, tired. The chair rocked faster. Scritch, 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 scritch. Then the camera glitched. Not static, not distortion. A frame skip. One moment, empty chair, rocking. Next moment, the chair was stopped, and the seat, indented, deeply, like someone heavy had just stood up. The audio continued. A breath. Then, "You remember?" I watched the video 3 times, deleted it. That afternoon, I drove to the county records office. The cottage was built in 1948, owned by one family, the Haskells, until 1993. Then sold to a holding company, then to Mrs. Gable in 2001. No deaths reported on the property, no incidents. But in the Sycamore Gazette, January 1992, local man missing after night hike. Ethan Haskell, 28, failed to return from an evening walk on Ridge Trail Tuesday night. Search teams combed the woods for 3 days but found no trace. Haskell, a recluse since the death of his younger sister, Mara, in a car accident 2 years prior, was described by neighbors as withdrawn and haunted. His cottage remains undisturbed. Authorities suspect foul play, but no evidence has been found. Ethan Haskell. My name. Same spelling, same age, 28. Mara, my sister, car accident 2 years ago. I stared at the microfiche. My hands shook. Looked up Ethan Haskell. No social media, no obituaries, just a single line in a digitized police report. Case closed, presumed deceased. Personal effects retained by next of kin. Agnes Haskell, mother, deceased, 1995. I drove back to the cottage, stood in the doorway, looked at the chair. It wasn't a chair, it was his chair, mine. The 4th night, I didn't resist. I sat on the bed, waited. 2:00 a.m. Scritch, scritch. The chair began to rock. I didn't turn on the light, didn't speak, just watched. The moonlight caught the runners, gleaming faintly. Then the whisper. "Ethan." Closer. From the chair, I stood, walked to it, sat down. The wood was cold, the padding firm. I leaned back. The chair rocked, not by itself. With me. I closed my eyes, and I remembered. Not a dream, a return. The night Mara died, rain slicked roads, my hands on the wheel, her laughter, bright, sudden, cut off by the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, the shatter of glass. The silence after, the hospital, the doctor's voice. She didn't suffer. Lies, they all lie. I walked out, drove home, sat in this chair, rocked for hours, for days, until the world outside blurred, until my name sounded foreign in my own head, until I whispered it to the walls just to hear it spoken. Ethan. And one night, I stood up, walked out the back door, into the woods, ridge trail, the drop-off near Hemlock Gorge, the wind, the edge, the last thing I felt, the chair still rocking in the empty cottage, as if waiting for me to come back. But I didn't. I fell, or jumped, or let go. The report said no trace, because there was none. The body was never found, but the chair remained, holding the shape of me, holding the grief, holding the name. The chair slowed, stopped. I opened my eyes. The room was the same, but I was different, lighter, clearer. The whisper came again, this time not from the chair, from inside me. "You're home!" I stood. The chair stayed still. For the first time, I walked to the window, looked out at the woods, the trail, the gorge. No fear, just peace. I turned back. The chair was empty, but on the seat, a single pine needle, fresh, and beside it, a photograph, not the one I kept on the dresser, an older one. Mara and me, 10 years old, arms around each other, smiling, on the back, in my handwriting, always with you. I picked it up, tucked it into my pocket, sat on the bed, waited, not for the rocking, not for the whisper, for the knock. It came at 2:18 a.m., soft, 3 times, on the front door. I walked downstairs, opened it, no one there, just the wind, and on the porch step, a second photograph. Mara, alone, smiling, eyes bright, alive. She wasn't in the hospital. She wasn't in the ground. She was waiting. Like the chair, like me. The whisper came, not in my ear, in my bones. "Go to her." I didn't pack, didn't lock the door, just walked down the driveway, into the woods. The trail was clear, the moonlight, bright. I didn't stumble, didn't hesitate. At the edge of Hemlock Gorge, the wind died. Silence. And there, on the rock where I'd stood that last night, a rocking chair, identical, waiting. I sat. It rocked, gently. Scritch, scritch. And from the trees, voices, Mara's laugh, my mother's hum, and my own voice, whole, unbroken, whispering, "Welcome home." The chair doesn't rock beside my bed anymore, because I'm not in the bed. I'm in the chair, rocking, watching, waiting for the next Ethan, the next grief, the next name, whispered into the dark. It always comes, and when it does, I rock and I whisper back, "Ethan," because the chair remembers, and the woods forgive, and the dead, they never stop waiting for someone to sit and remember with them. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. I found my missing dog. But it wasn't my dog anymore. Buster was more than a dog. He was my anchor. In the 3 years since I'd moved into the old farmhouse, with its creaking floors and the vast whispering woods that pressed in on all sides, he had been the steady, thumping heartbeat of my quiet life. He was 100 pounds of goofy, slobbery, unconditionally loving golden retriever, a walking antidote to the silence that had settled in after my divorce. His disappearance wasn't a gradual thing. It was a violent tearing in the fabric of my reality. One moment, he was there, chasing a squirrel at the edge of the property line where the manicured lawn gave way to the tangled, primeval dark of the forest. The next, he was gone. There was no yelp, no bark, Just a sudden, deafening silence. The weeks that followed were a special kind of hell, a blurry montage of sleepless nights and frantic, desperate days. I plastered every telephone pole, every community bulletin board, every gas station window for a 30-mile radius with his smiling, dopey face. "Missing!" The posters screamed in a bold black font that felt wholly inadequate to convey the gaping wound in my life. "Buster, very friendly. Family is heartbroken." I offered a reward that was more than I could afford, a number born of pure desperation. I walked those woods until my feet were blistered and my throat was raw from calling his name. I spoke to neighbors I'd only ever nodded at before. I called the local shelter every single day, my voice cracking with the same rehearsed plea. Nothing. It was as if the earth had simply opened up and swallowed him whole. Hope, a stubborn, resilient weed, began to wither. The silence in the house grew teeth. Every creak of a floorboard was him about to round the corner. Every rustle of leaves outside was him scratching at the door. But the door always remained closed. The corner always remained empty. It was on the 28th day, a Tuesday, that I found him. I'd given up, really. I was driving home late from the city, the hollowed-out feeling in my chest having settled into a permanent, dull ache. The headlights cut a lonely tunnel through the thick, rural darkness. And then I saw him, a flicker of gold at the side of the road, about a mile from my house. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding on the loose gravel of the shoulder. He was just standing there, in the halo of my high beams, panting slightly. He was thinner, his ribs a faint corrugated line beneath his matted, filthy coat. There was a fresh, jagged scar across his muzzle, and one of his ears had a torn, ragged edge. But it was him. It was Buster. "Buster," I whispered, my voice choked with disbelief. His head tilted. His tail gave a single tentative thump against his leg. I threw the car door open and stumbled out, a sob tearing its way out of my throat. "Buster! Oh, my God! Buster!" I ran to him and fell to my knees on the damp asphalt, wrapping my arms around his neck. He smelled of pine needles and damp earth and something else, something vaguely metallic and unpleasant, like old blood. He felt solid, real. He was here. He was alive. He licked my face, a familiar wet rasp against my cheek, and in that moment all the strangeness, all the questions, dissolved in a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated relief. The king had returned to his castle. My world had righted itself. The first hint that the world was still tilted on its axis came that very night. I filled his bowl with his favorite kibble, the expensive kind with freeze-dried chunks of salmon that he would usually inhale in under 30 seconds. He walked over to it, sniffed it once, and then turned away with a look of complete disinterest. He padded over to his water bowl and drank, a long, deep, lapping sound that seemed to go on for an eternity. "Not hungry, bud?" I asked, stroking his back. "You must be exhausted." I chalked it up to trauma. He'd been lost in the woods for a month. He'd probably been surviving on whatever he could catch. Processed kibble must have seemed alien to him now. I left the bowl out for him and went to bed, my heart so full I felt like it might burst. I fell asleep to the comforting sound of his heavy breathing from the dog bed at the foot of my own. In the morning, the food bowl was still full, untouched. But Buster seemed fine. He was sitting in the middle of the living room rug, watching me with an unnerving stillness. His tail wasn't wagging. His body wasn't wriggling with the usual good morning excitement. He was just observing. I knelt down in front of him, and he licked my hand, but the gesture felt mechanical, rote. It was like he was performing a trick he'd been taught long ago. And his eyes. That was the first thing that truly burrowed under my skin. Buster's eyes had always been two pools of warm, brown, goofy affection. They were expressive, emotional. These eyes were different. The color was the same, but the light behind them was out. They were flat, glossy, like the eyes of a taxidermied animal. They held a deep, unnerving intelligence, but it was a cold, analytical intelligence. Not the intelligence of a dog, but of something else entirely. When I looked into his eyes, I didn't feel seen by my best friend. I felt scanned, assessed. The days that followed were a slow creeping accumulation of wrongness. The subtle behavioral shifts were the most disorienting. Buster had always been a vocal dog, barking with joyous abandon at squirrels, the mailman, a car door slamming down the street. This new Buster was silent, utterly, unnervingly silent. He moved through the house with a stealth he'd never possessed before, his paws making no sound on the hardwood floors. I'd turn around from the kitchen counter, and he'd just be there, standing in the doorway, watching me. He stopped responding to commands he'd known since he was a puppy. Sit, stay, shake. The words meant nothing to him. He wouldn't even react to his own name most of the time, but he was smart, frighteningly so. He learned to open the back door by watching me turn the lever handle. He figured out how to get the lid off the kitchen trash can, not with brute, clumsy force like the old Buster, but with a delicate, precise manipulation of his paw. Then came the food issue. He continued to refuse his dog food, but he was eating. I'd come home to find packages of raw meat I'd had in the fridge torn open on the kitchen floor, the contents gone. One afternoon, I found him in the backyard, hunched over the mangled, bloody remains of a raccoon. He looked up at me, his muzzle dripping with gore, his eyes holding no shame, no fear, just that same flat, calculating stare. He wasn't my dog who would get sick from eating a piece of dropped cheese. This was a predator. I kept trying to rationalize it. He was feral now. He was relearning how to be a domesticated animal. The trauma had changed him. I clung to these explanations like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood, even as the water rose around me. The other animals in the neighborhood began to vanish. Mrs. Gable's fat ginger cat, Marmalade, who used to sun himself on our shared fence line. The yappy little terrier from 2 houses down. They just disappeared. I'd see their missing posters go up, their owners' faces etched with the same panicked grief I had known, and a cold, sick feeling would pool in my stomach. I'd look at Buster, lying placidly on the rug, and he would meet my gaze, his tail giving that same single, deliberate thump. "I know what you're thinking," his eyes seemed to say, "but you can't prove it." The mimicry was the most insidious, the most psychologically shredding part of the ordeal. Just when I would become convinced that this creature was a complete imposter, it would do something that was so perfectly, quintessentially Buster, that it would shatter my resolve. It would suddenly nudge its head under my hand for a scratch behind the ears in that specific way he always had. It would let out a soft, contented groan as I rubbed his belly, a sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat. But these moments were always slightly off-key. They felt like carefully deployed weapons designed to confuse me, to keep me off balance, to make me doubt my own sanity. It wasn't him remembering, it was it learning. It was perfecting its role, using my own reactions as a guide. The breaking point, the moment my desperate denial finally crumbled into dust, happened in the woods. I'd been hearing strange noises from the forest at night, a high-pitched, chittering sound, almost insect-like. One Saturday, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain, I went looking. I took Buster with me, or rather, he followed me, a silent golden shadow at my heels. I pushed deeper into the trees than I usually did, into the damp, primordial heart of the woods. And then I found it, a small clearing, hidden by a thicket of thorns. In the center was a shallow pit, and in the pit were bones, animal bones mostly. Deer, raccoon, a few smaller skeletons I recognized with a sickening lurch as cats, and half buried in the dirt, caked in mud but still glinting in the dappled sunlight, was a small metal object. It was Buster's old collar, the red leather one with the brass name tag, the one he had been wearing the day he disappeared. It was torn, as if it had been ripped off with incredible force. I stared at it, the world dissolving into a low, buzzing hum in my ears. The real Buster had never come home. The real Buster had died out here in this place. My best friend was gone. The creature standing silently behind me, the one wearing his face, his fur, his body, was his killer. It was a cuckoo in the nest, a monster that had murdered my family and then come home to live with me. I turned around slowly. The thing that looked like my dog was watching me, its head tilted. There was no pretense in its eyes now, no attempt at canine affection, just a cold, ancient, alien intelligence. It knew that I knew. The game was over. Its mouth opened, but not to pant. The jaw unhinged, stretching wider than any dog's jaw should, revealing rows of needle-sharp, almost shark-like teeth. And from deep within its throat came a sound, a wet, clicking, multi-toned sound that was a grotesque mimicry of my own voice. Alex, it rasped, the name broken and distorted. Good boy. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped behind a wall of pure, paralyzing terror. I just backed away, step by agonizing step, my eyes locked on the abomination in front of me. It took a step forward, and its form seemed to shift, to ripple. Its front legs elongated, the joints cracking and reforming, becoming more like arms. Its spine lengthened, and it began to rise unsteadily onto its hind legs. It was a thing of impossible angles and fluid, unnatural movement, a half-formed nightmare struggling out of a familiar, comforting disguise. That's when I ran. I turned and sprinted through the woods, branches whipping at my face, my lungs burning. I didn't look back, but I could hear it behind me. It wasn't the sound of a running dog. It was a heavier, faster, loping gait, accompanied by that horrible, chittering click. It was toying with me. It could have caught me at any second. I burst out of the woods and didn't stop. I ran into my house, slammed and bolted the door, my hands shaking so violently I could barely work the lock. I stood there panting, my back pressed against the wood, listening. Silence. Then a soft, familiar scratching sound at the door. A plaintive, heartbreaking whimper, a perfect imitation of Buster when he wanted to be let in. "Alex," the whimper seemed to say, "let me in. I'm your best friend." I fled. I grabbed my keys and my wallet and nothing else. I went out the front door, got in my car and drove. I drove for hours, not caring where I was. Going just putting as much distance as possible between me and that house, between me and that thing. That was a year ago. I live in a city now, a high-rise apartment on the 32nd floor, surrounded by the comforting, anonymous noise of millions of people. I don't own any pets. I flinch when I see a golden retriever on the street. I have nightmares every night. I know what it is now, at least in the abstract. I've spent countless hours in the dark corners of the internet, reading hushed-up folklore and frantic, pseudo-scientific theories. It has many names: skinwalker, a doppelganger, an echo, a thing that watches, that learns, that imitates, a predator that doesn't just hunt for food, but for lives. It steals them, wears them like a coat, and it does it so perfectly that you almost don't notice until it's too late. I thought I had escaped, but a few weeks ago I was walking home from work and saw a poster taped to a lamppost. It was for a missing cat, a fluffy Persian named Snowball. I would have ignored it, but something made me stop. It was the photo, a cheap color copy of a cat looking at the camera. But its eyes, they were flat, black, and held a cold, calculating intelligence that had nothing to do with a cat. They held an unnerving familiarity. I tore the poster down, my hands shaking. I know it's out there. It's here, in this city. It's shed its old skin and is trying on a new one. And I know with a certainty that has become the new anchor in my life that it's hunting again. And maybe, just maybe, it remembers me. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. I took a job in an old library and noticed the books kept rearranging themselves into sentences I'd whispered in my sleep. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but the Aldridge Athenaeum offered something rarer than money: silence. Not the absence of sound, but the deep, resonant quiet of centuries-old paper and polished oak. After 2 years of fruitless job hunting with my useless folklore degree, the part-time archiving position felt like sanctuary. Mr. Finch, the head librarian, hired me on the spot. He was a gaunt man in his 70s, with watery eyes magnified by thick glasses and hands that trembled slightly as he showed me the ropes. "The Aldridge," he'd said, his voice a dry rustle like pages turning in an empty room, "is not merely a repository of books, Miss Vance. It is a living organism. Treat it with respect, and it will treat you kindly." He hadn't elaborated, just handed me a worn leather ledger and a cart of misshelved volumes, his gaze lingering on me a fraction too long before he retreated into his glass-walled office. The building itself was a relic. Built in 1893 by a reclusive industrialist named Silas Thorne, it squatted on the edge of the university district like a brooding stone gargoyle. Stained glass windows depicting forgotten scholars cast fractured rainbows on dusty floorboards. The air perpetually smelled of aged paper, lemon oil, and the faint metallic tang of the old radiator pipes that groaned and hissed like sleeping serpents. My duties were simple: reshelve returned books, assist patrons, though they were few and far between, and slowly, painstakingly, reorganize the chaotic Special Collections Annex, a dim, cavernous room in the basement filled with uncatalogued donations, crumbling manuscripts, and books bound in leather that felt disturbingly like skin. The first week was uneventful. I catalogued moldy ledgers, wiped grime from gilt titles, and learned the library's peculiar rhythms. The grandfather clock in the main hall chimed not on the hour, but seemingly at random intervals, its bong echoing through the stacks like a funeral knell. The fluorescent lights in the west wing flickered persistently, casting jumping shadows that made the marble busts of long-dead benefactors seem to leer. I chalked it up to the building's age. Old places have quirks. It started subtly on a Tuesday. I'd had a restless night, haunted by dreams of my childhood home, the creak of the third stair, the smell of damp wool from my father's coat. I'd woken, gasping, whispering a phrase my therapist had drilled into me during my anxiety phase. It's not real. It's just the house settling. The words had escaped my lips before I could clamp my mouth shut. That afternoon, reshelving philosophy texts in the third-floor stacks, I froze. On the shelf labeled Ethics, 1700-1750, 3 books stood out like sore thumbs, not by placement, but by title. They formed a sentence perfectly, horrifyingly. It's not real. It's just the house settling. Hardcover bindings, a dusty green volume of Hume's treatise, a cracked spine on Locke's essay concerning human understanding, and a pristine, gold-embossed copy of Berkeley's Principles of Human Knowledge. They weren't part of this section. Hume and Locke belonged 2 shelves down. Berkeley was in metaphysics. But there they were, side by side, their spines forming the exact words I'd whispered into my pillow at 3:17 a.m. My blood turned to ice water. I scanned the empty aisle. No one, just the dust motes dancing in a shaft of weak afternoon light. A trick of the mind, I told myself. Stress, lack of sleep. I reshelved the books correctly, my fingers numb, and forced myself to focus on the dewy decimal numbers. That night, I slept with the light on. The second incident happened 3 days later. I'd been arguing with my landlord over the phone about a leak, my voice tight with frustration. Later, half asleep, I'd mumbled into my pillow, "This place is falling apart around me." Just venting, just words lost to the dark. The next morning, in the Special Collections Annex, I was sorting through a box of uncatalogued donations, mostly worthless pamphlets and mildewed ledgers. I pulled out a heavy cloth-bound volume titled Municipal Infrastructure Reports, 1880-1889. Oh, it felt wrong in my hands. Too light. I opened it. The pages were blank. Every single one, except for the very last page, scrawled across it in faded, spidery ink that looked decades old, was the phrase, "This place is falling apart around me." I dropped the book like it was burning hot. It landed with a soft thud on the mildewed carpet. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't stress. This wasn't coincidence. The words were mine, whispered in the dead of night, in the privacy of my own rented room miles away. How? How? I spent lunch hour in the university archives, digging into the Aldridge's history. Silas Thorne, eccentric, wealthy, built the library as a monument to his wife Lavinia, a noted scholar of obscure folklore who vanished under mysterious circumstances in 1891, 2 years before the library opened. Local newspapers were coy, citing delicate health and a prolonged European convalescence. But buried in a society column was a chilling detail. Lavinia Thorne was rumored to have suffered from severe somniloquy, violent sleep-talking, and had been collecting local superstitions about voice thieves and dream eaters in the months before her disappearance. Silas Thorne had donated his entire personal collection, including Lavinia's unpublished research, to found the Athenaeum. The library was her tomb. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of my apartment building, every sigh of the wind, felt like an intrusion. I lay rigid in the dark, consciously sealing my lips, focusing on my breathing, terrified of what might slip out. But exhaustion won. I dreamed of Lavinia Thorne, not as she appeared in the single stern portrait hanging in the main hall, but as a wisp of shadow in the library stacks, her mouth moving silently, hungrily. I woke with a gasp, my own voice echoing in my ears, raw and unfamiliar. I can feel her watching me from the shelves. Dread settled in my stomach like a stone. I called in sick. I couldn't face the library. But by noon, the silence of my apartment became unbearable. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen. Listening, I needed to see it, to prove it was just my unraveling mind. I drove back to the Aldridge, parking my car hastily on the street. The library was unnaturally quiet. No Mr. Finch in his office, no patrons. The only sound was the erratic tick, tick, tick of the grandfather clock, slower than usual, each tick stretching into a sigh. I went straight to the main fiction section, heart pounding. I found them on the Gothic romance, 1800, 1850 shelf. 3 books. The Monk by Lewis, Melmoth the Wanderer by Maturin, The Italian by Radcliffe. Their spines formed the sentence, "I can feel her watching me from the shelves." The words were clear, undeniable. And Radcliffe's book was upside down, its pages splayed open slightly, as if it had been placed that way deliberately. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I backed away, bumping into a book cart. It rattled loudly in the silence. From the direction of the Special Collections Annex, deep in the basement, came a sound. Not a groan of pipes, not the flicker of lights. A soft, rhythmic thumping, like a fist slowly, patiently, tapping against wood from inside a closed cabinet. Thump, thump, thump. I ran, not towards the exit, but towards Mr. Finch's office. I needed answers. I needed to know what I'd walked into. I yanked open his office door without knocking. He was sitting at his desk, but not working. He was staring out the window at the gray afternoon sky, his face ashen. On his desk lay an open ledger, not the one he'd given me, but an ancient, leather-bound volume with tarnished brass corners. Its pages were filled not with catalog numbers, but with cramped, frantic handwriting. Phrases, sentences, dozens of them, scrawled in different inks, some faded brown, some startlingly fresh and black. Make it stop singing in the walls? The baby won't stop crying, and it's not mine. I left the oven on. I know I did. She's under the floorboards. She's always been under the floorboards. And at the very bottom of the last filled page, in a shaky hand that matched Mr. Finch's tremor, but was far more desperate. It takes the whispers. It hungers for the words we lose in sleep. Lavinia's ghost isn't lost. She's the hunger. The library is her mouth. Mr. Finch didn't turn. His voice was a broken whisper, thick with tears he wouldn't shed. You felt it too, didn't you? The words you shouldn't have spoken, appearing where they don't belong. He finally looked at me, his magnified eyes wide with a fear that had long since curdled into resignation. Silas Thorne didn't build this place for his wife. He built it around her, to contain her. Lavinia, she wasn't just a scholar. She believed in the old things, the things that feed on unguarded thoughts, on the raw, unfiltered words we spill when our minds are unguarded. She tried to bind one, or perhaps it bound her. When she vanished, Silas knew. He walled up her study in the basement. the room that's now special collections, and poured his fortune into stone and silence, hoping to starve it. But stone doesn't silence hunger. It only makes it patient. He tapped the ledger with a trembling finger. This is the record. Every night watchman, every cleaner, every stray patron who muttered in their sleep near the stacks, their whispers, their fears, their secrets, Lavinia's echo takes them. It rearranges the library's bones to speak them back, to feed the thing that wears her name. It's been starving, decades of silence, until you came. He looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time. You talk in your sleep, Miss Vance, loudly, clearly, and you carry such vivid fears. The house settling, falling apart, being watched. It's banquets for it. A crash echoed from the basement annex. Not a thump, a crash. Like shelves collapsing. Mr. Finch flinched, his face crumbling. It knows you're here. It knows you know. It wants the rest of your words, the deep ones, the ones you whisper about your sister. My breath stopped. Clara, my little sister, who drowned in Miller's Pond when I was 10. The guilt that had lived in my bones for 20 years. The words I choked back every single night. The ones that sometimes escaped in ragged, tear-filled whispers. I should have been watching her. It was my turn. Another crash, closer, from the stairs leading up from the basement. The rhythmic thumping was gone, replaced by a wet, tearing sound like leather splitting apart. Books were falling, thudding onto the stone floor below. Mr. Finch stood up, his chair scraping harshly. "There's a way," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the growing chaos below. "Lavinia's original research, her journal, it's not in the catalog. Silas hid it, within the hunger, in the very heart of special collections. A small blue book, vellum pages. If you can find it before it finds you, it might tell you how to starve it again, how to silence it." He grabbed a heavy brass letter opener from his desk, his knuckles white. "I'll hold it off. Go, now, down the left corridor, third door on the right. The real special collection." He moved past me, towards the archway leading to the basement stairs, his frail body suddenly rigid with a terrible resolve. "Remember the words, Alara," he called back, his voice cracking. "Remember what you whisper. Don't give it those words." I didn't hesitate. I ran. Down the dim main hall, past the staring busts, past the grandfather clock which now chimed a single, discordant bong as I passed. The left corridor was darker, narrower, the air thick with dust and the smell of dry rot. The third door on the right was unmarked, made of heavy scarred oak. It was slightly ajar. From within came the tearing sound, louder now, mixed with a new sound, a dry, papery rustling like 1,000 pages being frantically turned at once, and beneath it a whisper, not one voice, but dozens, layered over each other, rising and falling like a sickening chorus. Watching from the shelves, falling apart. Not real, not real, not real. Oh, should have been watching. My sister's name, my guilt. It was hunting for it. I pushed the door open. Special Collections wasn't just a room, it was a cavern. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stretched into gloom, crammed with books, scrolls, wooden boxes. But they were in chaos. Shelves had been violently wrenched open. Books lay scattered like fallen soldiers, pages splayed open. Dust hung thick in the beams of weak light filtering through high, grimy windows. The air vibrated with that dry, tearing rustle. And in the center of the room, hovering 3 feet off the ground, was a swirling vortex of pages. Torn leaves from hundreds of books spiraled around a core of deeper shadow, forming shifting, fragmented sentences that dissolved as quickly as they formed. Clara is cold. The water was so dark. My fault, my fault, my fault. It was feeding. It was trying to form the sentence it craved most. I dropped to my knees, scrambling through the debris on the floor, ignoring the dust choking me, the way the torn pages seemed to writhe under my fingers. Blue book, vellum pages, Lavinia's journal. My eyes darted over spines, over broken bindings. Nothing. The whispering chorus grew louder, more insistent. The vortex pulsed, the shadow at its heart, deepening, stretching towards me like a grasping hand made of ink and dust. The temperature plummeted, my breath fogged in the air. Ilara! The chorus hissed, weaving my name into the fragments. Ilara, you were supposed to watch. Tears blurred my vision. I kicked aside a pile of mildewed pamphlets, and there it was, tucked beneath a shattered globe stand, a small, unassuming book bound in faded blue cloth, its edges soft with age. Vellum pages peeked from within. Lavinia's journal. I grabbed it just as the vortex surged. The swirling pages shot towards me like a flock of angry birds, enveloping my arms, my legs, clinging with unnatural stickiness. The whispering became a roar inside my skull, drowning out thought, hammering the terrible true sentence it wanted to complete. I should have been watching Clay. I wrenched the journal open with my free hand. The pages were brittle, covered in Lavinia's elegant looping script. I flipped frantically past sketches of strange sigils, past notes on dream parasites, and the consumption of unspoken grief. The pages stuck together. The whispering intensified, the pages binding my wrists like restraints. Cold seeped into my bones. I saw Clara's face in the swirling shadow, pale, waterlogged, her eyes wide and accusing. Rah! The chorus screamed, completing the name. I should have been watching Clara. The words ripped from my throat before I could stop them. A raw, sobbing confession torn from 20 years of buried pain. The vortex shrieked. A sound like tearing parchment amplified 1,000-fold. The pages binding me tightened, cutting off circulation. The shadow lunged, a gaping maw of darkness forming within the vortex, reaching for my face, for my mouth, to devour the source of the words. My eyes landed on a passage in the journal. A single, underlined phrase written in frantic, jagged letters that looked nothing like Lavinia's usual hand, as if written in terror. 2. Starve the hunger, speak the truth you bury not in darkness, but in light, not the whispered guilt. The truth, the real truth. With a gasp that tore my throat, I wrenched my head back from the shadow maw and screamed the words not in a whisper, but in a ragged, defiant shout that echoed off the stone walls of the annex, shattering the whispering chorus. I was scared. I was 10 years old, and I was scared to go in the water after what happened to Benny Miller. It wasn't just my turn, it was my fear. Clara knew I was scared. She waved at me from the dock and smiled, and I smiled back, and then she slipped and I froze. I froze. That's the truth. That's what I bury. The vortex shattered. The pages fell like dead leaves, fluttering silently to the dusty floor. The shadow dissolved into wisps of smoke that vanished before they touched the ground. The cold receded, replaced by the familiar damp chill of the basement. The whispering was gone. utter silence descended, broken only by my ragged sobs and the distant normal tick-tick-tick of the grandfather clock filtering down from above. I lay on the cold stone floor, surrounded by scattered books and torn pages, Lavinia's blue journal clutched to my chest like a shield. The air smelled only of dust and old paper, no decay, no hunger. I don't know how long I lay there. Eventually, I heard Mr. Finch's slow, shuffling footsteps approaching the annex door. He paused in the doorway, leaning heavily on the brass letter opener, his face pale but calm. He took in the chaos, the scattered pages, me trembling on the floor. He didn't speak. He just nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. He understood. I still work at the Aldridge. The pay is still terrible. But the silence now is different. It's not the silence of waiting hunger. It's the quiet of a deep, old wound finally scabbed over. I reshelve books. I help the rare patron. I never whisper in my sleep anymore. I speak my fears aloud to friends, to my therapist, to the empty air of my apartment when the shadows grow long, out loud in the light. But sometimes, on the quietest afternoons when the dust motes dance in the stained glass light, I'll be reshelving in a forgotten corner. I'll pull a book from a high shelf, and for just a second the spine won't match its neighbors. The title will be wrong, and if I look closely, in the grain of the old leather binding, I might see the faintest impression of letters, like words pressed deep into the material by an invisible hand. She knows. I close the book. I reshelve it correctly. I take a deep breath of the lemon oil and paper air, and I walk away, speaking softly to myself, my voice clear and steady in the quiet library, out loud, always out loud, because the silence between the shelves is no longer empty. It's listening, and it remembers the taste of words. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. I was hired to watch an empty mansion, but every mirror shows a crowd. The job posting was absurdly specific, absurdly lucrative. Security monitor required, historic residence, isolated location, 14-day assignment, $3,500 flat fee, duties, nightly patrols, 22 Gal 06 Del Jaro, logbook entries, perimeter checks, no interaction with structure or contents, strictly observation only. Applicant must be comfortable with solitude, silence, and absolute adherence to protocol. Background check required. Inquiries to custos@viridianstate.com. $3,500 for 2 weeks of walking around a big empty house. It sounded like a scam or a setup. But the background check was real, thorough, invasive, conducted by a firm with impeccable credentials. And the money. My student loans were a suffocating weight, and my temp job barely covered ramen. Desperation again overruled prudence. The email came 3 days later. Congratulations, Mr. Ellis. Your application for the Viridian Estate assignment has been accepted. Report to the property at 18 hours on June 12th. Keys and instructions will be provided. Remember, observation only. Do not touch. Do not enter rooms unnecessarily. Do not engage. Your safety depends on compliance. The Viridian Estate wasn't on any map I could find. Directions led me down a series of narrowing county roads, finally onto a gravel track choked by pines. After 20 minutes of bouncing over potholes, the trees fell away. It wasn't a mansion. It was a citadel. 3 stories of pale gray stone, stark and severe, with narrow dark windows like watchful eyes. No turrets, no ornate carvings, just clean, brutal lines, more fortress than home. It sat on a bare granite outcrop, surrounded by nothing but wind-rustled grass and distant hazy mountains. A high wrought iron fence, topped with sharp spikes, encircled the property. The gate stood open, a silent invitation, or a trap sprung. A man waited on the steps. Late 50s, sharp suit, thinning silver hair, eyes like chips of flint behind wire-rimmed glasses. He held a small black case. "Mr. Ellis, Mr. Thorne." His handshake was brief, dry, and conveyed zero warmth. Punctual, good. He didn't smile. "The terms are non-negotiable. You observe, you patrol, you log, you leave the interior untouched. Violate this and the contract is void. Payment forfeit. Immediate ejection." He opened the case. Inside lay a heavy, old-fashioned key on a brass fob, a thick, leather-bound logbook, and a sleek, modern digital voice recorder. The key accesses the ground floor only, the kitchen, the main hall, the service corridor. The upper floors and west wing are off-limits. The logbook is for handwritten entries, time, weather, observations. The recorder is for supplementary audio notes. Only if you witness something anomalous. Use it sparingly. Report only what you see, not what you think, not what you fear. He handed me the case. "Your shift begins at 22 for an hour. You have 4 hours to settle in, familiarize yourself with the permitted areas. Do not wander, do not explore. Dinner is in the kitchen icebox. Basic provisions, you'll find a cot there." He turned to leave, then paused. "One final thing, Mr. Ellis. A peculiarity of the Viridian estate, the house, reflects. Be mindful of what you see in the glass. It is not always accurate. Focus on the physical reality. Ignore the reflections." He walked down the steps, got into a black sedan that hadn't been there a moment before, and drove away, leaving me alone on the granite steps, the massive oak door looming before me. The key turned smoothly. The door opened soundlessly. Inside, the air was still and cold, smelling of stone, dust, and old paper. The main hall was vast, empty, except for a single scarred wooden table holding a kerosene lantern. No furniture, no art, just bare stone walls, bare floorboards, and towering narrow windows draped in heavy, dust-sheeted curtains. Directly opposite the entrance, a grand staircase swept up into shadow. To the left, an archway led to the kitchen, a functional, stainless steel space with a cot folded in the corner, an icebox humming softly, and shelves stocked with canned goods and bottled water. To the right, a corridor, the service corridor, Thorne had called it, led deeper into the house's belly. I dropped my duffel on the cot. Thorne's warning echoed. Ignore the reflections. I scanned the hall. There were mirrors, not ornate, gilded affairs, but large, functional plates of glass set into the stone walls at intervals. Likely for security to see around corners in the old days. They were dusty, tarnished at the edges. I approached the first one. It showed the empty hall behind me, my own reflection, pale, wary, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. Normal. I moved to the next. Same thing. Hall, me, dust, relief, thin and fragile, washed over me. Peculiarity, old glass, distortion. Thorne was just being dramatic or testing me. I ate a cold can of stew, the silence pressing in. 21:45, time to prep. I filled a lantern, checked the flashlight Thorne had included in the case. I opened the logbook. Thick, creamy paper. On the first page, in precise angular script, assignment. Security observation. Viridian Estate. Observer. A. Ellis. Dates. June 12th, 25. Protocol. Observe. Log. Do not engage. Below it, blank lines for entries. 22. Car. I lit the lantern. Its warm, flickering light pushed back the gloom, casting long, dancing shadows. I stepped into the main hall. First patrol. Perimeter check. Thorne had stressed it. Walk the fence line inside the property. Confirm all gates, just the one main entrance, are secure. Easy. I opened a heavy front door and stepped out. The wind was stronger outside, carrying the scent of pine and cold earth. The fence stretched away, iron black against the twilight. I walked clockwise, my boots crunching on the gravel drive. The house loomed at my back, its windows dark, watchful. I reached the far corner, turned, and stopped. In the large window of what I assumed was the library, ground floor, west side, the interior light from my lantern, held low, cast a reflection onto the glass. It wasn't just my reflection, dozens of them. A crowd. Men and women in dark, old-fashioned clothing, suits, long skirts, hats, packed tightly together. Their faces turned towards me, towards the window. They weren't moving, just standing, watching. Their expressions were indistinct in the low light, blurred by the glass, but the sheer number of them pressed shoulder to shoulder in a room I knew was empty sent a jolt of pure ice down my spine. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Trick of the light, refraction, my own distorted shadow multiplied. I raised the lantern higher. The crowd remained, dense, silent, watching. I forced myself to walk closer, peering past my own reflection. Inside the window, beyond the glass, it was empty, just bare floorboards, bare walls. Dust motes danced in my lantern beam. The physical reality was void. The reflection was teeming. Ignore the reflections. Thorne's voice, calm, certain. I tore my eyes away, finished the perimeter check with shaken hand, and practically ran back inside, slamming the heavy door shut. 22:15. Logbook entry. 22:15. Perimeter check complete. Fence secure. Main gate latched. Observed reflection anomaly in west-facing ground floor window. Library. Multiple figures visible in reflection. Interior confirmed empty upon direct observation. Protocol followed. No engagement. My hand trembled as I wrote. Reflection anomaly. Clinical. Safe. I moved into the main hall for the interior patrol. Stick to the center. Observe the mirrors. I passed the first mirror. My reflection. Alone. Good. The second mirror. My reflection. And a blur of movement behind my left shoulder. A dark shape. Tall. Indistinct. Gone before I could focus. I stopped. Breathed. Peripheral vision. Shadow from the lantern. I walked slowly to the third mirror, the large one at the base of the staircase. I steeled myself, looked. The hall behind me was filled, not dozens, hundreds. A sea of faces, men in stiff collars and dark coats, women in high-necked dresses, hair pinned severely, children in miniature versions of the adults. They stood in perfect silent rows, filling the vast space of the hall, spilling up the first few stairs, pressed against the walls where, in reality, there was only empty stone. They weren't looking at me. They were all looking up. Towards the top of the staircase, their faces were pale, blurred, like figures seen through old, warped glass, but their stance, their utter, unnerving stillness, was chillingly real. In the center of the crowd, near the foot of the stairs, stood a man, taller than the others, wearing a long, dark coat. His face was clearer, gaunt, stern, eyes like deep wells. He wasn't looking up. He was looking directly at my reflection. At me? My blood turned to slush. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The lantern light flickered, making the crowd seem to ripple, to breathe. Then, as if sensing my paralysis, the man in the coat raised his hand. Not a wave, a slow, deliberate gesture, his index finger extended, pointing not at my reflection. Through the mirror, at me. A strangled gasp escaped my lips. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, crashing into the stone wall. The lantern clattered to the floor, its light guttering wildly, casting frantic, leaping shadows. When the light steadied, I looked back at the mirror. Empty. Just the hall. Just my own terrified face, white as bone, eyes wide with primal fear. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the lantern. My hands were slick with sweat. Ignore the reflections. Ignore the reflections. Ignore the reflections. 22:30. Logbook entry, the pen digging. Into this paper. 22:30, interior patrol. Mirror 3, stairwell base, exhibited significant reflection anomaly. Dense crowd visualized. Estimated 200-plus figures, all facing staircase. One figure, male, dark coat, appeared to gesture. Interior confirmed empty upon physical verification. Observer momentarily disoriented. Protocol maintained no engagement. Disoriented. An understatement. I felt hollowed out, violated. The rest of the patrol was a blur of terror. Every mirror was a potential trap. The one in the service corridor showed me walking alone until I passed it. And in the periphery of the glass, a child's small, pale hand reached out from behind a door that was, in reality, closed and empty beyond. I didn't stop, didn't look back, just walked faster, my boots loud on the boards, the tick, tick, tick of a clock somewhere in the house suddenly deafening. Midnight. I retreated to the kitchen, barricading the door with a chair I knew was useless. I sat on the cot, back against the stainless steel counter, lantern beside me, the logbook open on my knees. My watch read 00:07. Thorne's voice echoed, "Your safety depends on compliance." Compliance meant ignoring the impossible. But how do you ignore a crowd of ghosts pointing at you through glass? I needed proof. Tangible proof, not just my shaky testimony. Thorne had given me the voice recorder for supplementary audio notes, only if you witness something anomalous. Was seeing a silent crowd in a mirror anomalous enough? It felt like the bare minimum of what this house offered. I picked up the recorder, pressed record. My voice, when I spoke, was a dry rasp. Log supplement, June 12th, 00:08. Arthur Ellis, stationed in kitchen. Visual confirmation of mass reflection event in main hall mirror 3. Crowd estimated 200+. Period clothing silent, all oriented towards upper floors. One individual interacted, gestured, pointed. I took a shaky breath. Physical sweep confirms interior spatial emptiness. Reconciling visual data with physical reality remains challenging. Requesting clarification on nature of reflection peculiarity cited in briefing. Is this expected? Is it harmless? Advise. I stopped the recording. The silence rushed back in, thicker, heavier. The tick, tick, tick of the clock was gone, replaced by something else, a murmur, faint, distant, like a crowd waiting in another room, a low hum of voices, indistinct, formless, but undeniably they're coming from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the air itself. It grew louder, not angry, not threatening, expectant, like an audience settling into their seats before the curtain rises. My eyes darted to the small round mirror mounted above the sink. I saw my own reflection, pale, sweating, eyes wide, and behind me, reflected in the mirror, filling the small kitchen space that was, in reality, empty, except for me and the cot. The crowd. Dozens of them crammed. into the tiny space, their blurred faces turned towards my back. Silent, waiting. The murmuring swelled, filling my ears, a tidal wave of soundless expectation. I squeezed my eyes shut. Not real, not real, not real. I opened them. The mirror showed only me. The murmuring stopped. O2R, patrol time. I couldn't stay in the kitchen. Protocol demanded it. I stood up, legs trembling, picked up the lantern. My hand hovered over the voice recorder. Don't. Thorne's warning. Use it sparingly. Maybe if I just observed, documented, didn't react. I removed the chair barricade, opened the kitchen door. The main hall was darker. The lantern felt feeble. I walked towards the staircase, forcing my gaze straight ahead, refusing to look at the mirrors on the walls. I reached the base of the stairs. The large mirror was to my left. I didn't look. I focused on the steps. Dark wood, polished, leading up into absolute blackness. Just log it. Move on. I turned to face the hall for the entry, and my eyes, traitorous, slid sideways to the mirror. It wasn't the crowd this time. It was me. My reflection stood at the base of the stairs just as I did, but it wasn't mimicking me. It was looking up the stairs, and it was smiling, a slow, wide, utterly alien smile that stretched far too wide across its face, revealing too many teeth glistening in the lantern light. Its eyes were black pits. It raised its hand, my hand, and pointed, not at me, but up the staircase, into the darkness. Go on, the smile seemed to say. Go see. A whimper escaped my throat. I tore my gaze away, fumbling for the logbook, my hand shaking so badly I dropped the pen. I scribbled, the words jagged. O2, 15, mirror, 3, reflection of observer, exhibited, autonomous behavior, smiling, gesturing towards upper floors. Physical self remained stationary, no engagement, perimeter check aborted, returning to kitchen. I ran back to the kitchen, slammed the door, rebarricaded it, collapsed onto the cot, pulling my knees to my chest, forehead pressed against them. The rationalizations were gone, shattered. This wasn't reflection. This was invitation, or summons. Dawn came, gray and weak, filtering through the high kitchen window. The murmuring was gone. The mirrors, when I dared peek, showed only my exhausted, hollow-eyed reflection. I ate nothing, drank water. My watch read 05:50, almost over, almost safe, 05:55. Final patrol, quick, perfunctory, just the main hall, in and out. I picked up the lantern, took a deep breath, opened the door. The hall was bathed in faint gray light, shadows retreating. Safer. I walked to the center, looked around, empty, stone, wood, dust. I allowed myself to glance at the first mirror, my reflection, tired, relieved. The second mirror, my reflection, and behind it, near the archway to the kitchen, a single figure, the man in the dark coat, standing alone, watching my reflection. His hand was no longer pointing. It was extended, palm up, an offering, an entreaty. My breath hitched. Ignore it. Last patrol. 5 minutes. I turned towards the staircase for the final log note and saw it. On the third step up, a small wooden box, plain, unvarnished, about the size of a shoebox. It hadn't been there before. Impossible. I'd walked past these stairs a dozen times. It was just there. Thorne's voice, cold and final. Do not touch. Do not enter rooms unnecessarily. Do not engage. The box sat there, innocent, waiting. The man in the mirror behind me didn't move. His palm remained upturned. My feet moved, not towards the kitchen, towards the stairs. One step up, the air grew colder. Another step. The smell of stone dust intensified, mixed with something else, old paper, dry flowers, cold earth. I stood on the second step. The box was on the third. I could see the grain of the wood, simple, handmade. The logbook said, "Do not engage." The contract said, "Observation only." But Thorne hadn't mentioned boxes appearing on stairs. What was in it? A key to the upper floors? To understanding? A letter? An explanation? A relic? The man in the mirror watched. His dark eyes held no threat, only profound aching sadness and a desperate, silent plea. My hand lifted, not reaching for the box, not yet, reaching for the small round pocket mirror I always carried, a habit from a childhood of checking for spinach in my teeth, a talisman of normalcy. I pulled it out, flipped it open, held it up, angling it to see the box on the step above me. The mirror showed the third step. Empty. The box wasn't there. I lowered the pocket mirror, looked up with my own eyes. The box sat on the third step. Plain, unvarnished, real. I raised the pocket mirror again. Empty step, lowered it. Box. The dissonance was a physical blow. Which was real? The physical step or the reflection? Thorne's words. Focus on the physical. Reality. The physical reality said the box was there. The reflection said it wasn't. Which truth did I trust? My hand, slick with sweat, lowered a pocket mirror completely. I looked at the box. Then, slowly, deliberately, I reached out. My fingers brushed the rough wood. It was cold, solid. I lifted it. It was lighter than expected, hollow. There was no latch, just a simple, snug-fitting lid. I looked back at the main hall mirror. The man in the dark coat was gone. The hall behind my reflection was empty. Just me on the stairs, holding the box. The murmuring began again, not loud. A soft susurration, like dry leaves skittering on stone, coming from inside the box. I sat down on the second step, the box cradled in my lap. The lantern light flickered. I opened the lid. Inside, nestled in faded blue velvet, lay a single object, a small ornate hand mirror, silver frame, tarnished black. The glass was cloudy, ancient. I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, cold as grave soil. Hesitantly, I turned it towards my face. The cloudy glass cleared. It didn't show my reflection. It showed the grand staircase behind me. Packed, floored a vaulted ceiling with the crowd, thousands of them now, silent, still, every face turned towards me, towards the small mirror I held, and in the very center of the throng, on the landing above, stood the man in the dark coat. He wasn't looking at the mirror. He was looking directly at me. Through the glass, through the veil. His lips moved. No sound came from the box. But in the sudden, absolute silence of the hall, in the space behind my own eyes, I heard the words, clear and cold and final as a tomb sealing shut. Witness. The word wasn't a command. It was an absolution, a purpose, a life sentence, I understood. The Viridian estate wasn't haunted by the dead. It was haunted by the unwitnessed, the forgotten, the erased, the lives lived and lost without a single soul to say, "I saw you. You were here." They weren't trapped in the house. The house was their monument. And the mirrors, they weren't windows to another world. They were pleas, begging for acknowledgement, begging to be seen, begging for a witness. My job wasn't security. It was ministry. The $3,500 wasn't payment. It was a retainer. I looked down at the small silver mirror in my hand. My reflection was gone. Only the crowd remained, their silent faces a sea of longing. I closed the lid of the box, stood up, walked back down the stairs, not to the kitchen, to the main hall mirror. I stood before it, took a deep breath of the cold, stone-scented air, and looked. The crowd filled the hall, waiting. I met the eyes of the man in the dark coat, and I nodded, a single, solemn dip of my chin. Yes, a sigh seemed to ripple through the reflection, a softening, a release. The man in the coat bowed his head, just slightly. In my pocket, the voice recorder felt heavy. Unnecessary. I wouldn't need it anymore. My logbook entries would change. No more anomaly, no more disoriented. Just 06, Rouse, witness, confirmed. I turned from the mirror, the small silver hand mirror warm now in my grasp, and walked towards the kitchen, not to hide, but to prepare. The cot would stay. The canned stew would be eaten. The patrols would continue. But my purpose was clear. I would watch. I would see. I would witness. And every night, when the lantern light flickered on the glass, I would look, not away, but in, and I would count them one by one until they were all seen, until the last forgotten face found its reflection. The crowd would wait, and I, Arthur Ellis, the hired observer, the accidental witness, would stand sentinel in the empty mansion, filled at last with the silent, grateful dead.